across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello and good morning to you. Happy Wednesday. And if you're in London, why? Why have you put yourself through that? Why are you subjecting yourself to the pain? I interrailed once again around our fair capital this morning amidst the tube strikes. And I tell you what, it's not for the faint-hearted. I kind of feel with my railway navigation skills, as I've now acquired in order to get simply from one part of London to the other, I deserve a scout badge by the end of the week. So if you happen to be an adept embroiderer, please do stitch me one up and I'll wear it proudly here on my lapel. Thank you ever so much for tuning again. I'm sitting in for the wonderful Julia Hartley-Brewer, who's off doing brilliant journalistic things in distant climes. And I'm going to be with you again 10 till 1 tomorrow, and indeed then, of course, Friday, which is my normal slot anyway, but I don't need to tell you that because you were already planning to tune in, weren't you? I don't know if you were, but if you were, thank you very much. And it's been a pleasure to be here in the hot seat during the course of this week, because there is a lot going on. It's what we like to call in the trade a newsy week. And the news just keeps on coming. And it's bad news, I would say, at the moment for Lord Mandelson, although the man is pretty much political Teflon, as there's this expose of people who'd written in some sort of 50th birthday tribute book, letters and notes of adoration to Mr. Epstein. The new ambassador to America is under the spotlight today for his very special relationship with the former paedophile financier who he called his best friend. Yeah, it's not really who you want to be associated with, is it? And then this really sticks in my craw, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, we live in a world where I just can't make sense of it anymore. I don't understand why when people are illegally breaking into our country, most other countries, I hate to say it, would be treating these people with the full force of the law and then some, but not us. We put them up in hotels, we provide them houses, give them mobile phones. But apparently, if they're actually detained, which is, in my mind, surely what you should do if someone breaks into your country illegally, they could now be in line for millions in compensation for being unlawfully detained in inhumane conditions. Are you kidding me? Are you absolutely kidding me? And as people are trying to work hard to shut down the migrant hotels, well, we can't put them in detention centres, can we? Because then we'll have to pay them a gazillion pounds instead. These sneaky hotels, some of them are planning to now convert into HMOs to bypass the law. Here's an idea. Why don't we all collectively go, I've had enough. UK's gone. Give it to all the people from the third world anyway. Because I feel like we're not being given a choice. We're going to be discussing all of that, talking as well about the escalation of things in the Middle East as Israel took out people of Hamas in Doha, not the leadership, Hamas says, but it's one of the first times Israel has striked Qatar. What does that mean? America doesn't seem to be very impressed. And we're also going to be talking about the fact that the number of Brits who no longer really believe in global warming, yeah, once upon a time you were considered kooks and weirdos, weren't you? It's soared by 50%. I think we're all beginning to realise that everything we've been told to believe in isn't necessarily science, i.e. a woman cannot have a penis. So can you really expect people to go along with things when we know we've been told flagrant anti-scientific lies? To talk us through the first big stories of the day, I'm delighted to say I'm joined by the brilliant former Conservative Party leader, Sir Ian Duncan-Smith. Good morning to you, Ian.
Good morning, Alex. Standing in for Julia.
I know, but I do get my own little bit on a Friday every now and then when they let me out of my cellar to come up like a screaming banshee. Let's first of all listen to Peter Mandelson being interviewed by our very own Harry Cole on his new show, Harry Cole Saves the West.
I feel a tremendous sense, a profound sense of sympathy for those people, those women who suffered as a result of his behaviour and his illegal criminal activities. And secondly, I regret very, very deeply indeed carrying on that association with him for far longer than I should have done. And I regret very much that I fell for his lies. I fell and accepted assurances that he had given me about his indictment, his original criminal case in Florida. Like very many people, I took at face value what he said. With hindsight, with fresh information, many years later, we realized that we had been wrong to believe him. He's a charismatic criminal liar, we now see, and I regret very much indeed. I felt it like an albatross around my neck since his death in 2018 or 19, when it was. I feel a tremendous sense of regret, not only that I met him in the first place, but that I continued the association, and I took at face value the lies that he fed me and many others.
Oh, my heart bleeds. I feel so sorry for him, Ian. I mean, this poor man, he's so naive. He was in the upper echelons of politics and he can't spot a fraud, a narcissist and a flagrant paedophile when he's best friends with one.
I don't know if you heard it as well. I thought I heard violins in the background. I just thought I did, the sobbing going on in the back, because he's been obviously misused. The fact is, you should remember that Peter Mandelson is the arch spin doctor of all time. So there is a man now trying to spin that somehow he is sorry. The truth is, he has a record of being constantly close to these very powerful, wealthy characters. I remember he used to use the yacht for Deripaska, who is one of those sanctioned Russian oligarchs as well. So this is not a man who just happened to fall into the lap, as it were, of Epstein. I mean, this is a man that has made a big thing about always being with wealthy people that could shower money on him and things like that. So all I would say is the whole issue, the idea that you can be a friend of his, you can be there the whole time and call him your best friend and not have any clue at all that there are women being used in the way that he was. I find it very hard to believe, and I have to tell you that I think that there are big questions to be asked of the Prime Minister. When did he know anything at all about this relationship that Mandelson had with Deripaska? Did he know it before he appointed him? If so, why did he appoint him? If he didn't know, well, what the hell are his security staff and his intelligence staff not telling him about what they knew, and they certainly knew, about the relationship that he had with Deripaska? So very big questions for the government today on Prime Minister's Questions, but are going to continue. So it's one crisis after another for Keir Starmer.
Do you think his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein warrants his position being called into question? Should he be sacked?
I don't see how Peter Mandelson can now continue as the UK's ambassador to the United States. I just think there's no way on earth he'll be taken seriously. I think that with all this rumbling on in the United States anyway, I think it would be impossible for the UK to get a position at all to make statements about things that are happening in the US or things that are happening on the wider front abroad, such as Gaza, Ukraine, all these areas, because every time he will appear, people will point the finger and go, wasn't that the man that visited Jeffrey Epstein and stayed with Jeffrey Epstein after he had been convicted as a paedophile?
Let's move on, as we all think Peter Mandelson should also do, to talk about this. I mean, Ian, I despair. I really do. The fact that these people who have broken into our country, who have flagrantly broken into multiple countries, who are canny enough and savvy enough to know how to work with, pay people traffickers and cross an entire continent. I don't regard these people as in any way poor little scared victims. I think they're fairly industrious human beings, those who manage to get on boats to come into our country. And now apparently 200 of these people have lodged legal claims for unlawful detention and mistreatment by the Home Office at the Manson Migrant Holding Centre near Dover. Of course, they're citing the ECHR. Now, when I'm well-travelled, I've been to many different countries of the world, and I'm fairly certain if I tried to barge my way into Kotoko Airport in a car without a visa and without a passport, I'd probably be grabbed by the scruff of my neck and put in far worse conditions than Manston.
Yeah, there's two or three things to be completely clear about this. First of all, the only victims in all of this are the children. The children that have been taken onto these terrible rickety boats. We saw the other day, yesterday, that children have died as a result of that. They don't get any say in this. People pay to go on the boats. This is not as though they're being dragooned onto the boats. They pay a lot of money to get on the boats because they want to come to the UK. So this is a matter of choice and a matter of money. So the key problem here is that our whole setup around the human rights laws is completely bonkers. And the reality is here that we are now beginning to see two things happening. One is constant judge-made interpretation turning it into law. So all the excessive interpretation of what were very general statements, bad as they are, general statements in the Convention of Human Rights set up after the Second World War to try and stop people like Hitler ever coming back. It wasn't about migrants. And the second thing is that you're seeing now a lot of these sort of ambulance-chasing lawyers. Now, there's no question that some lawyers have got to these characters and said, oh, just look what you could do. Give us 5% or 10% or whatever, and we will pursue this case to try and get some money off you. And, of course, what happens then, the judges then start to rule on this area, and governments are in a complete mess. The only way to do this the end of the day is to say to them, if you land on the UK shores, you will be heading further away from the UK than when you started. And that was the Rwanda scheme, and that fell, not because we couldn't get it through, but because we couldn't get the changes made to the law. You have to now either opt out or break that link with the Convention of Human Rights, but not just that, a whole bunch of other things like the Refugee Convention, some of the rights of the child. I trust UK judges to be sensible when they lose this and make the right decisions based on what's right for people.
I mean, I think it's worth talking about, frankly, and I've been saying this for a while, that there is an international illegal immigration industrial complex. There are people traffickers making vast amounts of money.
Billions.
Yes, it's a bit more than the illicit drugs trade. There are the people traffickers, terrorist organisations, leftist lawyers, these big hoteliers, people who are buying up rental accommodation and turning them into HMOs, NGOs. There were all sorts of people making an absolute fortune out of this, and I think that needs to be made patently clear more often.
Well, Alec, I have to tell you that if you really examine it, what's happened to British government over the last 15 years is that we have basically been taken over by left-wing human rights lawyers who have now changed the nature of government and made it difficult for anybody to govern. I mean, you only have to look at the ridiculous nonsense that the government's got into on the Chagos deal, handing over critical strategic territory to a country which actually is very close now to China and doesn't seem to like the UK very much. So we lose our control ultimately over that. We've no idea where that will go in due course. But the reality is that, why? Because all the Starmer, Hermer, who's now Attorney General, and the lawyer that took the case for Mauritius to get back the Chagos Islands, they're all in the same chambers, I understand. Yeah. All human rights buddies. So now what's happening, you might as well kind of forget about government, it seems to me at times, and I look at this, because government is now second-guessed all the way through by this constant driving determination to make everything about people's human rights rather than what is better for the UK. And that is the problem now. And, you know, the trouble for this government is they start in that court. So, you know, and the nonsense, by the way, that they got that somehow you're going to crack the gangs. These are the same gangs that are involved, by the way, in drug dealing, all that sort of stuff as well. They are seeing a profit, and the risk for them is nominal. Right. You know, these guys will pay their money, get them across. They don't care what happens to them. And that's where we're left with thousands upon thousands of people sitting languishing because we can't get their court cases through because they keep claiming the right to family life and all these other nonsenses which we have to get rid of.
I couldn't agree more. And what do you make of this, the fact that locals in Hull really angry that a particular former hotel has legally applied to become an HMO in order to accommodate asylum seekers there. It's going to be, therefore, one of the largest houses of multiple occupancy with 122 bedrooms. I mean, come on, that is not a house, that is still a hotel. The Portland Hotel, which was once a swanky 4-star attraction when it opened in the 1960s, sits empty, but it's now going to be used to house these migrants by essentially, it's a bit like that thing where, you know, it's not a man, it's a woman because it's got a dress on. Oh, it's not a hotel, it's now a house.
Well, I can see why the hotels are doing it, because they're looking at the government thinking these people are a complete mess. They need accommodation because they can't get people sent away. And so the reality is, I tell you what we'll do, we'll get full occupancy all the year round. We'll go and declare ourselves an HMO. I mean, that is how stupid the whole thing is. I don't blame hotels for doing it because the government's ready to stuff money down their throats and say, you know, if you give us these spaces, they'll be occupied 24 hours a day, 12 months in the year. So, of course, a hotel that may be in some difficulty will say, yeah, let's do that. The problem is the legal position should be quite different. These hotels should not be being used to house migrants. The reality is it becomes a greater pull factor, the fact that you're going to be staying in a hotel rather than actually being processed in a camp, which isn't all that comfortable. So I have to say that this is yet another mess that we seem to have got into, but we now need to block all of that and say hotels cannot be used as migrant centres.
And as we look at the sort of rapidly changing demography of the United Kingdom, there are various people who are calling on Shabana Mahmood to urgently change the rules when it comes to migrants who can claim citizenship, saying that they should actually extend that to make sure migrants wait 10 years before they can apply for the right to stay in the UK indefinitely. I mean, it's something I would fully back. I don't understand equally why people come into this country and seem to have immediate access to all sorts of things, from housing to benefits to NHS care. It makes a mockery of all of the Brits who've been paying into the system, whose ancestors built this country, who find themselves all of a sudden at the back of the queue.
Yeah, well, it comes down to the single fact that this government attacked the whole idea of Rwanda, which was about saying to people, don't risk it, don't give your money away because it won't be worth it, you'll be sent somewhere else. The only way in which you can stop this is to make sure the disincentive for people coming across is greater than the incentive. And that at the moment it's the other way round. And because the government has got rid of all the legislation that would have been key to Rwanda, because they're not prepared to take on this issue of what to do about human rights. And by the way, most of Europe now is debating this issue on the Convention of Human Rights. Italy is talking for big change. France has been saying it. The Germans are talking about it. You know, here we are languishing right in the arrears of this because we should be talking about getting rid of this constant nonsense that allows judges to overrule what Parliament has done. Parliament's meant to be the Supreme Court of Britain, and now it's become shunted into some kind of backwater where everything we do gets reinterpreted by the judges, and we get told, forget it, there's a higher law than what you produce, which is ridiculous because the British public didn't vote for the Convention of Human Rights. They voted for British governments, and those British governments should have the right and the power to be able to say, no, we don't agree with this, and what we're going to do is do something different. And until we do that, we will keep on seeing the boats coming across because there is no disincentive, and the risks, they say, are less than the incentive.
Ian, it's been brilliant catching up with you today. Thank you ever so much for coming on the show and sharing your thoughts and opinions. There must be some sort of Latin word for governance by the judiciary. Is it judiocracy or something? I mean, we really need to get back to democracy, don't we? Right, we're going to take a short break now. Coming up after the break, tensions are knife edge again over in the Middle East after Israel launched strikes on what they claim to be Hamas leadership in Doha as they were convening there to discuss Donald Trump's ceasefire proposal. Was this a flagrant breach of a relationship? Should they be condemned, or are they just defending themselves? We're going to follow up all of those questions just after the break.
I think that people just had enough of him. There's people are more worried about putting their, getting to work and putting the food on their table than another moan, oh, my brother wasn't as nice to me as he should have been moan, and things like this. I think people have had enough of the Harry and Meghan story, and really, I think if the King did actually see him, what are they going to discuss? Well, I would imagine, what sort of money, what payouts you're going to get,
I mean, that is frightening, but so true.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back to the show. Now, yesterday saw a significant increase in tensions over in the Middle East as Israel struck Doha, the capital of Qatar, killing 6 Hamas members, so they say. Donald Trump has hit back, condemning it as Israel's Judgment Day blitz. Said he immediately sent a warning to Qatar the minute he knew that the missiles were in the air, but it was too late to stop the attack. Is this really as it looks, though, what we know of Qatar, as they are a key US ally? Lots of US air bases there. In fact, it was the CIA who had asked the Qataris to house Hamas leaders in fancy apartments with swanky lifestyles, essentially, so America could keep eyes on. So did Israel act without letting America know? Did America then let Qatar know, but too late? Or is there something else going on here? Well, let's speak now to Major Dan Pfefferman. He is chairman of Sharaka, national security analyst and intelligence officer, and the co-editor of Middle East 24. Welcome to the show, Major Pfefferman. What has gone on here? Israel said it was trying to take out Hamas leadership. They've said from the beginning, we want to destroy Hamas. Hamas is saying, well, you didn't get any significant people. Qatar basically going, why are you striking us? America saying, we didn't tell you to do this, and then we tried to warn our mates over in Doha about it, but it was too late.
Yeah, look, I think Israel was very rightly beyond frustrated with the lack of Hamas's willingness to close down this war that they launched on October 7th. And we have to remember, this comes a day after there was a major terrorist attack in Jerusalem, not far from where I'm sitting, actually. 6 people, civilians, were murdered on a bus. At least 20 more were injured when 2 Palestinian gunmen walked onto a bus, passenger bus, and opened fire. This is a war that Hamas started unprovoked and refused to end. These people in Qatar who are being housed in Qatar are terrorists. And if they are not willing to diplomatically end the war that they started and accept a reasonable surrender,
okay,
there is no.
We understand. We understand Israel's incentive, and they've said very explicitly, constantly, we want to destroy Hamas, and everyone understands that. But the point is that these were rockets raining down in Qatar. They weren't raining down on the Gaza Strip. They weren't raining down on a nation that has been aggressive towards Israel. In fact, I remember when there was aggression coming from the Houthi rebels from Iran with rockets flying into Israel, military jets were launched from Qatar to intercept those rockets. Was it a wise decision to then send rockets into their territory, regardless of the target?
You mentioned at the outset that the United States had supposedly kind of worked with Qatar to house Hamas. We have to remember Qatar plays a very dangerous game. They are the main funder, supporter, an ideological channel for radical Islam in the region and in the world. They don't just house Hamas out of convenience. They actually support Hamas's overall goals, even if they do it with more tact and with a lot of suits. And so if Hamas's housing, if Qatar's housing of Hamas no longer serves an interest, if Qatar cannot play a significant moderating role and get the Hamas leaders to accept this surrender or a ceasefire on Israel's terms, then there's no point to them being in Qatar. But it must be clear, Israel didn't attack Qatar, it didn't attack Qatari officials, it attacked Hamas.
Are we to assume then, because look, I'll make the point again that Qatar has big US, UK air bases. In fact, when missiles were aimed at Israel from Iran, from Lebanon, military jets took off from Qatar to intercept those missiles, therefore to protect Israel. If Israel thinks it can strike Hamas in Qatar, the next question is, does Israel think it can also launch missiles into Turkey, if that's where the Hamas leadership happen to be?
It's an interesting question, and frankly, I was surprised that the Israeli leadership took the decision to strike at these Hamas targets, very legitimate targets in Qatar. But again, Qatar has always kind of been on the fence here, on the one side housing, as you said, American and UK forces, and sometimes acting as an ally, but more often than not, it funds, it arms, it provides the ideological backing for the radical elements in the region. And I think the message here from Israel is clear, that Hamas leaders, terrorist leaders, are not safe anywhere.
That is what's at the centre of all of this, isn't it? Because a lot of the Western allies of Israel, and I am a very huge champion of Israel, back its right fully to defend itself. We understand the precarious situation Israel is in and has been for centuries. We know who the enemy is. But it does seem to me, on the outside, if things are as they being sold to us in the public domain, that when you now have missiles going into other territories that have not necessarily been military aggressors against Israel, it starts asking a bigger question. Because certainly, I mean, look, I'm not going to compare apples and oranges, but we would condemn, for instance, Russia taking out Russians on our soil in the UK. It goes against any sort of diplomatic protocol. My feeling here as a result is there's probably something else going on in this four-dimensional geopolitical chess in which Qatar, Israel, America, etc. find themselves having a public role, but behind the scenes perhaps playing a very different role. And so it does lead me to question what is really going on here.
Yeah, it's a good question. And first of all, I would be very surprised if Israel did such a brazen move without American coordination and not just, as was reported, kind of last-second notification. We saw what happened with the Iran strikes, where it turns out it was a masterful kind of PR, strategic communications ruse. Look, I won't be shocked if in another month or two it comes out that even the Qataris themselves might have grown exasperated with Hamas's leadership and gave a wink and a nod to this. At this
my
point,
suspicion too.
Nothing would surprise me anymore at this point.
Right, that is where I was going with this. Having done a few geopolitical things myself behind the scenes, sometimes there is what is the public line and what might have actually happened. We don't know, I suppose, when it comes to these things. We will never know. Do you think, before I let you go, as a result, that this is going to risk any sort of escalation? Or if you and I are both sort of on the same page that actually there'll be more to this than meets the eye, that we probably have nothing to fear about Qatar retaliating in any way?
You can see already from the Qatari statements that they are committed as ever to remaining the mediator. I think the Qataris know full well what their role and what their use is as this intermediary, as this actor that can connect to and pressure all sides behind the scenes, fund all the sides. We know Qatar invests in your country as much as it does in Muslim Brotherhood elements and in the U.S. universities. So Qatar is not going to be looking to escalate. My sense is a lot of this is a show. The bigger move that's being played here is not really clear. As I said, I won't be surprised if there's a real exasperation, if the Qataris understood that their investment in Hamas is over. Maybe there's some serious American pressure here. What I would want to see is, instead of statements from world leaders like in your country, threatening Israel to recognize a non-existent and not realistic Palestinian state, that the entire international community needs to really clamp down here on Hamas, on the Qataris to clamp down on Hamas, on the Turks to clamp down on Hamas, and let's end this war in a way that gives a clear victory over a radical jihadist actor who launched an unnecessary and unprovoked war on October 7th. And we'll be curious to see in the coming weeks and months what's really unfolding here, because I agree with you. I think there's a lot more than meets the eye.
It's been fascinating talking to you. I do apologise on behalf of the British people. I, for one, do not particularly like the way that my government seems to be handling their role on the international stage in all of this. That was Major Dan Pfefferman. Really interesting. Like I said, there are always other narratives taking place when it comes to geopolitics. OK, we are going to take a short break now, and talking about subterfuge manoeuvres, we're going to be discussing the Labour deputy leadership competition after this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello and welcome back. Now, we all love, in the world of media, a bit of a leadership contest. All the Conservatives kept us entertained in the world of journalism, didn't they? Constant runners and riders. Sir Graham Brady, out he comes again, counting his envelopes. Factions, infighting, plotting, dastardly manoeuvres. It was like being, sitting on the edge of your seat at the cinema watching a political thriller. I'm a little more underwhelmed, I must admit, by the Labour deputy leadership contest. Not only because every single contestant seems to be the same sort of blueprint of the one before, some sort of, straight talking woman, leftist, socialist. I'm a woman, I want to be the next ever woman to be a deputy leader. But they're just a bunch of dismal characters, quite frankly. But I do need someone to try and inject some energy into it, and I know exactly where to go, because if you want the political gossip, the scandal and the intrigue, it is got to be Guido Fawkes. So let's welcome the editorial director from there, Adam Cherry, to the programme. Good morning, Adam.
Good morning, thanks for having me.
Right, now try and make this sound spicy, because now old Lego head the third, Bridget Phillipson, sort of trademark Marxist fringe, has thrown her hat into the ring. I kind of feel this is potentially done and dusted.
I don't know if it's done and dusted, and perhaps their personal politics are less interesting and they overlap in many respects, but the political consequences, I think, are, as you described it, slightly more spicy. Because unless it is Bridget Phillipson, who does have an early lead, although there's still some way to go before we reach the conclusion of this in October, certainly the other two leading candidates, or the other two candidates with the most nominations coming in, are strongly opposed to Starmer's agenda, or at least personally have reason to dislike him. Why? Well, in Bridget Phillipson's case, I mean, she's in the cabinet, so of course Downing Street want her to win. But second place, you had Lucy Powell. And Lucy Powell was only sacked, 5 days ago as leader of the House of Commons, and is also very, very close to Andy Burnham, the King of the North, who himself has personal ambitions. Behind her, you have Belrabira Addy, who's very much on the left flank of the party. Behind her, you have Dame Emily Thornberry, who, only had 7 nominations as of yesterday. That may change. As I say, still some way to go. She was the shadow attorney general leading into the general election. She was very loyal. And then as soon as they came into government, she was the only shadow minister not to make it into the government at all. Personally, for what it's worth, I'm not sure any of these candidates are particularly wanting an endorsement from Guido Fawkes, but I'll give it anyway because I'd quite like Emily Thornberry to give it a go. Don't like her personal politics, but then again, none of these people are going to be Roger Scruton. She is the only one, I think, that has any sort of semblance of authenticity. Like I said, politics, whatever, not so much, but at least someone with a bit of a personality in quite a dull field.
I know what you mean, actually. I mean, she's that woman that I love to hate. She is a sort of person, whereas Lucy Powell is instantly forgettable. So I understand where you were coming from on that one. Let's talk about old blimmin' Nicola Sturgeon. I don't understand how these people do it. They run their countries into the ground. Everything's a mess in Scotland. They're digging up her front lawn one minute because of missing party monies, as if she's got bodies buried underneath it. She sort of gets unceremoniously dumped when it's all about, men, women, all the same to me. And of course, the media loved her, didn't they? Nicola Sturgeon could sneeze and the whole world had to listen. At one point during COVID, I thought she was the one actually running the country because she's a woman. Oh, she's a woman. So all the sort of, legacy channels like, isn't that amazing? And she repeats the same things herself. She's now banging on that Angela Rayner has been treated unfairly over this tax scandal because she's a working class woman. I wonder if Nicola Sturgeon also thinks that Margaret Thatcher was treated unfairly because she was a working class woman.
Well, Nicola Sturgeon's got a book to sell, so of course she's got to squawk to get some publicity. Broadly speaking, though, people on the left don't like Upham, right? I'm pretty sure if Boris Johnson or whoever, Nadhim Zahawi, whoever else had some sort of similar scandal, it would have been Nicola Sturgeon who was first in line to say that he should resign, he's a terrible person, his politics are awful, etc., etc. As soon as it's someone of their tribe, okay, they're different parties, but ideologically they're kind of within the same milieu. Suddenly they don't like it Upham. So fine, this is politics. You know what you're signing up for. The game is the game. Get with the programme.
Yeah, it was quite interesting. She sort of contradicts herself, as she so often does, saying lots of rich men get away with a lot of stuff. There's no doubt she's treated differently because she's a working class woman. That doesn't mean she has to be held to lower standards. So what are you saying there, Nicola? I'm absolutely sick to death of this. It's because she's a woman. I mean, Rayner, in my book, is being held bang to rights. What surprises me most is more isn't made of the fact. I mean, there's the weirdness of the trust fund and the compensation money to the Sun, and where did she get, if she had £4 million, where did it come from, and how can she afford £800,000 on a mortgage? But to me, the glaringly hypocritical thing is she's decided, as Deputy Prime Minister, or former Deputy Prime Minister, and the person who oversees election standards, she decided she didn't want to live in her constituency but moved to the other side of the country from it. And then the same people going, well, that's fine, had a go at Nigel for flying over to America to say hello to his mate Donald.
Well, I think that is ultimately what did it for Angela Rayner. It wasn't any specific part of the allegations, although there was plenty to dig into. It was ultimately the hypocrisy. She was the cheerleader for several years against the previous government, of which there was plenty to criticise, but nonetheless, she was the one demanding they resign for so much as sneezing. And then when there's a whiff of scandal around her own circumstances, suddenly you have the likes of Nicola Sturgeon and others rallying around her, suggesting that this is all some sort of right-wing plot. It isn't. It is just being consistent. Look, another thing about Angela Rayner is now that she sits on the back benches, she becomes a much more interesting political figure to watch, because she will be a thorn in the side of Keir Starmer over the next several years. What has she got to lose? She can now build up her left-wing credentials. She was previously, so to speak, inside the tent going out. Now she's outside the tent. So what else is she going to do but organise against him? Who knows? She might be back very soon, perhaps in the next couple of years.
See, I think it's actually all part of some sort of ginger cabal. That's my theory. And maybe, Adam, there's a sort of strawberry blonde. You're in on it as well.
Yeah.
That was
I identify as strawberry blonde. Thank you very much.
There you are. Yeah, you're sort of a halfway house. Adam, thank you ever so much. It's been fantastic catching up with you. Right, let's take a short break now. When we come back, we're going to be looking at the BBC because apparently Gregg Wallace has decided he's going to sue them. He seeks to release secret documents which are going to clear his name. That's coming up after this.
I think that people just had enough of him. There's people are more worried about putting their, getting to work and putting the food on their table than another moan, oh, my brother wasn't as nice to me as he should have been moan, and things like this. I think people have had enough of the Harry and Meghan story, and really, I think if the King did actually see him, what are they going to discuss? Well, I would imagine, what sort of money, what payouts he going to get,
I mean, that is frightening, but so true.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, the judge of MasterChef, ex-judge of MasterChef, is going to be suing the BBC after his sacking. This is Gregg Wallace, who, of course, was booted from the show after complaints came in over his behaviour, particularly that towards women. He's turning around and saying, get this, that actually it's down to neurodiversity. He was formally diagnosed with autism. He's put in a statement. My neurodiversity, now formally diagnosed as autism, was suspected and discussed by colleagues across countless seasons of MasterChef, yet nothing was done to investigate my disability or protect me from what I now realise was a dangerous environment for over 20 years. So he is taking the BBC to High Court. Let's speak now to Rebecca Ryan, who's the campaign director of Defund the BBC. It's an interesting case, isn't it, Rebecca? Because some of the reports that came out about Gregg Wallace's behaviour, you kind of think, well, you can't do that in a workplace. That's probably not on. And he's the one saying, actually, it was a dangerous workplace for me because I'm neurodiverse. I mean, the BBC are going to be tied in knots by this.
Absolutely. They don't know which box they're meant to be ticking on this. Who's got the biggest grievance? But this is the issue, isn't it? Is that his behaviour was going on for well over a decade. When and if the BBC had an issue with it, they should have dealt with it at the time. And if he's saying, as he's saying there, that they all talked openly about his potential neurodiversity, then why didn't they do something about it at the time? So it'd be interesting to see how it all plays out in the court. But at the end of the day, if they have to give him a massive payout, it'll be the licence fee payer that's stumping up for it.
Right, that's the thing, it's us, we, the people who own television sets, who are going to be on the hook for whatever actually on the hook, for whatever outcome, because we're going to basically probably be paying all the legal costs for this. I think actually, moving away from the BBC, it's a very interesting test case. We've seen it happen in the sort of criminal law sector, where you have people who have committed atrocious crimes who are then diagnosed with a mental health condition and end up going to a secure hospital rather than prison, or have lesser sentences because of it. And you kind of start to think we end up in the weeds where, when does committing a crime become, well, it wasn't my fault, it was my weird brain?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about you, but I'm a bit of a true crime fan. And yeah, you often watch these kind of jury verdicts where they're asked to consider whether it's because somebody's got a mental health issue or not. But at the end of the day, surely we've got to draw a line as to what is someone's personal responsibility and what isn't. And at the moment, it seems like more and more behaviour is able to sort of come under this sort of spectrum of mental health conditions.
Yeah, no, I do. Because the thing is, most of us couldn't really, most of us don't commit crimes. I think most people who do probably are wired a bit differently. That's just a fact. Let's talk now, because Gregg Wallace is one in a series of scandals that have rocked the BBC. Who can forget Hugh Edwards, and of course that, Sir Jimmy Savile, no doubt, always on people's minds. And when quizzed up against a select committee in Parliament yesterday, the BBC boss Tim Davies had to sort of relent and say, well, more stars could be unmasked in abuse of power scandals. I mean, at the end of the day, in all walks of life, in all professions, there are wrong-uns, particularly those people who end up in privileged and powerful positions who seem to think, therefore, they become invincible. And some might argue no one is more privileged or powerful than people who become household names off the back of the state broadcaster.
Absolutely, and that was the thing yesterday in that committee, is that they were sort of squirming there, weren't they, in a sort of desperate attempt to get back to business as usual for the BBC. It's kind of, whitewashing away all of these issues. And he was very keen, Tim Davie, not to make any kind of commitment that there wasn't more scandal coming down the line. So it does make you wonder what else he's sitting on. But the thing is, in other organisations, if something comes up, it's dealt with quickly, and everybody understands that, yes, there are wrong-uns, yes, they should be dealt with, and that's okay. But the fact is, the BBC has this sort of history and this pattern of quashing any complaints and promoting people within these sort of jobs and giving them more power and a bigger platform, and then finally sort of 10, 20 years down the line, 30 years down the line, we find out that actually they've known about this behaviour all along. And that's what's really unacceptable for licence fee payers, is that they're being forced to pay these people's salaries when the BBC, had these red flags waving all over the place about them.
I've always thought it comes down to the basic no taxation without representation, and the licence fee is essentially a tax on owning a television. And I've always thought that what we should have, if we're going to keep any sort of a model like that, and there's a big argument, of course, around that, which is a campaign that you very much lead. But you can't just have a sort of BBC taking all this money and not being accountable. At the very least, the Director General should be sort of voted in on based on some sort of manifesto. Now, talking about democracy, it's a favourite trope of the left. They go, why are you giving Nigel Farage so much airtime? Oh, it's not fair, he gets so much airtime. And they're at it again. Liz Jarvis, the Lib Dem MP for Eastleigh, asked why the BBC gave reform wall-to-wall coverage when it only has 4 MPs. They replied, we are aware that the political system and the electorate are fragmenting. BBC News coverage reflects not just party representation in Parliament, but also what polling is telling us about how many people support one party. Do you want to know a funny little secret, a little fact, Rebecca? It was me who actually made the BBC Trust rewrite all of their rules when I was head of media for UKIP, and I argued, because they only based it on domestic elections, the most recent domestic election, i.e. they didn't involve European Parliament elections, and they didn't look at polling. And I kept making the case as head of media for UKIP back in the day, in 2013, actually you're doing a disservice to the general public when you look at polling and how many people actually want to hear from UKIP who are going to be voting for them. And I had to produce all this evidence. We had a series of meetings, and I was the one who changed the rules. There you go.
Excellent, well done. I mean, I think the thing is, and you know, the BBC are correct to say that absolutely they should be giving representation, and they are obliged to give representation to reform supporters, because that's in the Royal Charter, that, you know, that they are supposed to represent all parts of the UK. And what's interesting is that there's a Lib Dem MP there who is upset about it, because they've only got 4 MPs, when it's the Lib Dems who gained the system by sort of picking out those sort of constituencies in order to get a huge amount of MPs with very little national support. So, you know, she should perhaps, you know, think.
Well, it also makes me laugh that a Lib Dem MP is complaining about Nigel Farage having wall-to-wall coverage when their election strategy was constantly to stick their lead on some sort of body of water, be he larking around in a Lido or on a jet ski looking like an absolute muppet. You know, they had to essentially build a physical moat around the man so nobody could ask him questions. He turned basically democracy into Takeshi's Castle. I think it's unforgivable. But it's interesting, isn't it? You know, the BBC being cross-examined, and yet they talk about needing to politically give reform voices a platform, that this is a big news story and all the rest of it. Absolutely right. They still don't seem to understand that they also have to represent the views of the 30% of British people plus who actually are quite drawn to reform. That isn't about just putting the odd politician on a programme. That's about stopping turning everything into the woke games.
Absolutely, and that's the thing that we saw earlier on this week, didn't we, where the BBC put up a post, which they did actually remove fairly quickly, where they called the use of against the sort of illegal immigration votes, they called it racist in the headline of this post, and it shows that clearly they are not representing the views of a huge amount of the population that is supporting reform, as we've seen in poll after poll. I think it was over 100 polls now. The most recent polls have said that reform are in the lead. And so the BBC needs to do far better, as you say. It's not just about, you know, box ticking and getting, you know, a representative on from reform to talk in things, but also in their coverage. And that's what they find really difficult, because they have this groupthink within the organisation, and they have this culture of sort of metropolitan elitism, and they just can't identify with, you know, the average reform supporter.
Do you know, I would love it if the BBC were to conduct some sort of an anonymous survey of all of its staff and basically ask them for their attitudes on certain big topics and their political leanings. So it doesn't identify an individual, but what you get back is some sort of pie chart of where on the political spectrum everyone who works there is. And I would imagine it would be like a photo negative of the rest of the country.
Absolutely. I think we can be pretty safe that that's what the average BBC employee feels like. And that's why they sort of feel so cushioned and safe in their opinions. And that's why these things slip out all the time, why they accidentally make a documentary about Hamas using one of the Hamas leaders' children to do the narrative, you know, and it's just that it's so alien to them. Because within the M25 and the dinner party set, they're very, very used to hearing their opinions bounce back to them all the time, and they have no idea of, you know, what's going on in the rest of the country.
Oh, Rebecca, it's always brilliant catching up with you. Keep up the good work. Rebecca Ryan there, Campaign Director of Defund the BBC. Should we take a quick call on Mr. Wallace? This is Grace. Hello, Grace, my darling.
Hi. I am really angry, frankly, with Gregg Wallace. I was diagnosed with autism 20 years ago now, before it was quite so frequently diagnosed as it is at the moment. And I am very aware that there is an awful lot about my personality that is a mess. And I'm a sinner, as we all are, and I really need Jesus' forgiveness and Jesus' help with becoming a better person. But I know, to some extent, how to behave. And being autistic is not an excuse for how Gregg Wallace has behaved. And for him to try to pin how he has behaved on his autism is erroneous.
I mean, could there be? I mean, thank you for being so candid in talking about yourself. I really do appreciate that, Grace. It takes some courage to do that. But is there an element of delegating responsibility when someone is neurodiverse and saying, look, I don't have that level of awareness. I'm not the best social empath. I miss certain cues. So if I'm getting things wrong, I'm not doing it intentionally. I need you to understand around me. And if I'm about to step out of line or behaving inappropriately, please keep me in check. Perhaps because he seems to think he's got a lot of paperwork which is going to disclose something that's going to be some kind of smoking gun. Perhaps there were discussions to that end.
So several things. Yeah, we do to an extent naturally have less of an awareness of what is normal and acceptable and of how other people feel than people without autism. I am not good at understanding how other people feel, but I do care about how other people feel, even if I don't understand it. And because of that, I try to learn what is the right way to behave, and I don't necessarily do it very well, but I'm really wanting to learn to be as respectful and decent towards other people as I can, even though I don't instinctively necessarily understand it. And as I've grown closer to God, I felt all the more that I really want to be nice to other people. And I think that Gregg Wallace pretending that he's got to his age and not learned, in spite of the fact it might not come naturally to him, he's not learned what is decent behaviour. He doesn't seem to care what is decent behaviour. He wants instead to take advantage of other people by making jokes at their expense. I think is not excused by his autism. It is very problematic. And another thing to say is that his comments really reflect on other people on the autistic spectrum. Now, the majority of those of us on the autistic spectrum cannot get into work. I keep on applying for jobs and being rejected, and I'm furious with myself for continually being rejected for work. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to have a sob story. I'm very, very privileged to not be on the streets. But my point is, how are we supposed to make progress and contribute to society if we keep having people like Gregg Wallace telling society that people on the autistic spectrum can't behave?
Grace, it's a very valid point. You know, it's been wonderful talking to you. Blimey, I'd give you a job tomorrow. I could do with a PA. Grace, I think you're fantastic. You call regularly to this show, and we really do appreciate you, and God bless. Thank you ever so much. We're going to take a short break now, but when we come back, we're going to be digging into the pages of the press and speaking to Head of Features at The Sun, Colin Robertson. That is after this.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning and welcome back to the show. Alex Phillips sitting in for Julia at Hartley-Brewer. Thoroughly enjoying myself. I'll be with you same time, same place tomorrow. And my normal show as per usual on Friday, but I won't be doing the weekend shifts because a girl's got to have a break at some point, doesn't she? But thank you ever so much for keeping me company today. And if you want to have a chat with me, as Grace did just then, you can phone in and register your interest with the beautiful Alicia at any point. 0344 499 1000 is the number to dial if you'd like to register your interest in having a chinwag, and then Alicia will do the necessary vetting and store your number and your name, and at the right time give you a call back. It's your standard network rate, so basically it doesn't cost you anything and you can get a lot off your chest. And believe you me, if you waited for that service to be given to you by the NHS, you'd be waiting a very long time. You can also use that number to send me a WhatsApp message, or indeed leave me a voice note on WhatsApp. If you'd rather be a little bit more old school and you're still texting people like my mum, actually I don't think she does, I think even she's in the WhatsApp world now, but if you are still a smother, then you can also do that. 87222 is the number to text. But if you are going to text, you have to write the word talk before you write your message. That way it somehow manages to evade all the Chinese weather balloons, spy satellites, Starlink things and rockets, and maybe the odd orbital UFO to get down into this studio here and be displayed on my screen, where I can then read it out to the nation. We're also on X at talkTV. So get your thoughts and feelings rolling in, because throughout the show I want to take your calls and read out your messages. Right, OK, what are you going to be talking about? Well, that might depend on what we are talking about. And what are we talking about? Well, we're talking about what they are talking about, or the newspapers. And I'm joined by someone from that particular industry. He is the head of features at The Sun. It is Colin Robertson. Good morning, Colin.
Good morning.
Peter Mandelson. I mean, if anybody is the sort of consummate slippery politician with 1,000 lives, it is him. And when it was announced that Lord Mandelson was going to be ambassador, it was sort of like a chill descended over the Atlantic, and you thought, oh God, he's back. He always gets back somehow. Is he going to survive this particular incident, though? Because his relationship with convicted paedophile financier, the late Jeffrey Epstein, well, it wasn't just that they sort of knew each other from similar social circles. He was calling him his best pal. He was off staying on that island. And he's done this very sort of mea culpa but makes himself the victim interview with Harry Cole on Harry Cole's YouTube channel, Harry Cole Saves the West. Let's have a look at that, and then we're going to unpack it.
A tremendous sense.
Well, that was a short-lived experience. Peter Mandelson said it was something or the other. I'm sure that when the systems decide to reboot, we'll be able to play that one out. I blame it on the TfL strike. Everything in London's just grinding to a halt. But essentially, to paraphrase, because we did see that interview earlier, Mandelson is basically going, oh, it was an albatross around my neck. I didn't know. I deeply regret the friendship. And you think to yourself, come on, you've been in the upper echelons of politics. If your judgment of somebody's credibility and character is this rubbish, you're in the wrong game, lad.
Well, I mean, look, it's a great scoop from Harry. This is his debut show. Harry Cole Saves the West, as you've mentioned. You've not got the clip there, but we'll hear it later on. Watch it tonight, 7 o'clock on YouTube. It's brilliant. And it's great timing. Peter's there. Mandelson, Mandy, is there. As he says, he bitterly regrets it. He's deadly serious about this. And of course he bitterly regrets this, because he's basically, there's a letter where he calls a paedophile his best pal. And so, I mean, that's quite difficult. I mean, and also I think to myself, was it your best pal? I mean, he's obviously been engaged in a great deal of flattery for Jeffrey. And what we know about Peter is two things. We know that he's a tremendously talented politician and actually, you know, gets things done, and, you know, and that's why they brought him back as ambassador, and I can understand why they've done that. But he's also pretty gaff-prone, and sometimes those gaffes are linked to his love of the high life, should we say. You'll remember the Robinson business, where he borrowed, whatever it was, £370,000 private loan off Jeffrey Robinson to fund a house in Notting Hill that is public public wages couldn't pay for, because he likes to live in that high life. So when you're given access to Jeffrey Epstein's billionaire paradise in his private island where he's staying on there for a week and being served by the housekeeper and sitting around a bathroom, going for a swim, and all, it's all wonderful, isn't it? It's fantastic. So maybe you think, oh well, I'll call him my best pal to keep that going. Were they actually best pals? This is why it's excruciating for him that, you know, at the time, this is what, you know, he says, I didn't know what was going on. So he could have just assumed, here I am, hobnobbing with a billionaire and nobody really knows about it. I mean, I look back at some of the reports of when, in 2008, when he was done for basically, you know, fraternising with underage girls, some as young as 14. It wasn't the huge deal because not everybody knew who Jeffrey Epstein was. And at that time, Mandelson was still friends with him.
I mean, that's the thing. It might not be that everyone in the outside world knew who it was, but if that was your mate, the news gets to you, doesn't it? And certainly, if I suddenly heard on the grapevine that my mate was cavorting with underage girls, I'd probably don't want to be friends with that person anymore.
You certainly wouldn't think of them as your best pal.
Right.
If someone said, who's your best pal? Oh, it's the guy who's just who's currently in prison.
Right, yeah,
for fraternising with 14-year-old girls. You know.
We can actually now watch that interview, which makes my skin crawl. Let's see if you have the same reaction.
One, I feel a tremendous sense, a profound sense of sympathy for those people, those women who suffered as a result of his behaviour and his illegal criminal activities. And secondly, I regret very, very deeply indeed carrying on that association with him for far longer than I should have done. And I regret very much that I fell for his lies. I fell and accepted assurances that he had given me about his indictment, his original criminal case in Florida. Like very many people, I took at face value what he said. With hindsight, with fresh information, many years later, we realized that we had been wrong to believe him. He's a charismatic criminal liar. We now see, and I regret very much indeed. I felt it like an albatross around my neck since his death in 2018 or 19, when it was. I feel a tremendous sense of regret. Not only that I met him in the first place, but that I continued the association and I took at face value the lies that he fed me and many others.
Do you think his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein warrants his position being called into question? Should he be sacked?
I don't see how Peter Mandelson can now continue as the UK's ambassador to the United States. I just think there's no way on earth he'll be taken seriously. I think that with all this rumbling on in the United States anyway, I think it would be impossible for the UK to get a position at all to make statements about things that are happening in the US or things that are happening on the wider front abroad, such as Gaza, Ukraine, all these areas, because every time he will appear, people will point the finger and go, wasn't that the man that visited Jeffrey Epstein and stayed with Jeffrey Epstein after he had been convicted as a paedophile?
Exactly. And do you know what I find astonishing, Colin? Here is Peter Mandelson portraying himself as a victim. I was duped. I was lied to. It's been such a burden. He's equating himself as a victim of Epstein, which I find utterly deplorable. I find something really revolting about that, because the idea that you can be called Petey and be sitting around in your bathrobe on the island, which is sort of, you know, population of 200 scantily clad women all cavorting and doing weird things, and not think, there's something fishy here. I'm a politician. I should think about the optics of this. Everything about what Mandelson said really sticks in my craw. And if he is that innocent, if you put this on the flip side, and you do take his word for it, he was duped, he was lied to, he is the one who we should all feel sorry for. You know, if you had intelligence services vetting whether someone should be in a prominent position, such as ambassador to our closest ally, you would say, oh God, this guy's vulnerable to extortion. This guy's a bad judge of character. This guy can easily be led astray as long as you flash some cash at him.
I mean, it's interesting in but when if you listen to the full clip, which I hope your listeners will, he goes on to put part of the reason why he didn't know about any of this behaviour because he was gay, because he is gay. So he's sort of saying, well, look, all these terrible things that Jeffrey's said to have been done, they probably never came towards me. He never offered me any young girls or any ladies or anything like that because I was gay. So he's got a kind of quite a cute get-out-of-jail card there as far as to claim why he didn't see that. He probably didn't. I mean, he was gay, he was staying there with his partner, now husband.
He might not have done anything himself, but he's not blind. You know, it takes a different sort of, you know, a way of being to not see and hear offence. It's, you know, regardless of whether he was sort of getting the forehand massage himself, I just cannot believe this man spent so much time with Epstein. Would have been, when you're close friends with someone, you hear about, you learn of things going on in their life. You know, I've got a best mate in Ghana, and somehow via the sort of, I haven't spoken to her for a while, and I've just found out something about her. Because you do, when you're an associate of someone, you know things about them. This idea that you can get out of jail free because I'm gay, so I wouldn't have done anything with an underage girl myself, it doesn't mean he wasn't sitting there knowing exactly what was going on and had no empathy for these girls, had no alarm bells going off in his head, which is problematic, or if there were, decided to willfully ignore them.
Well, this is his hope, isn't it? That he, you know, everyone can rewrite history, and politicians are absolutely brilliant at rewriting history, and say, well, at the time I didn't recall anything, nothing was presented to me, I never saw anything untoward, etc., etc., etc. May be true, may not be true. Like, as you say, being immersed in that world, if it was as kind of, you know, if it was happening in the way that it was, it's wholesale young girls being brought in all the time, you'd think he might have caught a glimpse. Maybe he sat opposite him at dinner and there was a young lady, thought, well, who knows that? It's not his daughter. What's going on here? But we talk about, you know, you were suggesting that, you know, he's not blind. He's not blind, but sometimes he kind of is blinded in that situation, I think, because he's blinded by all the ostentatious, all the luxury, and that's his it seemed to be his number one priority. Here I am enjoying this fantastic life that my wages could never support. Here I am doing that. So maybe you hear a little whisper here, or you heard a little whisper there, but he's obviously, if that's what happened, he's obviously chosen to ignore it. He could have chosen to ignore it. He's saying never heard it.
He's either incredibly naive and stupid, which to me makes him a terrible candidate for UK ambassador, or he's not, and therefore he's a perfectly decent judge of character, but has a pretty malign element to him. In both senses, to me, he's compromised. And you have to ask, why on earth, out of all the human beings in the diplomatic corps, or people who would have a brilliant relationship with the Republican Party, out of everybody who could have done that job proficiently, Sir Keir Starmer decided to bring him back from the political grave.
Well, the sticky position for him is, and whatever he says, listen to the interview, whatever he says, the fact of the matter is that Jeffrey Epstein was in prison for relations with minors at the same time that Peter Mandelson was staying in his house. So, you know, you're telling me he didn't... Of course he knew where Jeffrey was. Of course he knew why he was in prison.
Right.
So, but still, he decided to live in his house. Now, for most people, they would find that extremely odd.
I mean, this is it, that I was lied to. No, you knew what you were getting yourself into. And the whole thing, well, I'm gay, so I didn't... It's a bit like someone saying, well, I saw Fred West chop up a few bodies, but because I'm scared of blood, I didn't help him. I mean, it, to me, doesn't really sort of make any sense to play that as a card.
Well, I'm sure he would have said, because as Epstein always maintained, oh, I thought they were 18. I thought they were 18. So if Mandelson had ever asked, he said, well, oh God, I've been tucked up here. I thought they were 18, and it's a real problem, and I'm not a paedophile. I just thought they were young girls, and you know, whoever he tells that to might have said, okay, gosh, you know, poor you've been caught up in this thing, and have you got the keys? where do I park the car? You know, it's kind of that's the problem for him. It's very embarrassing for Starmer as well that all this stuff is blowing up again. You've got Donald Trump coming over for a state visit, and all this is hanging over it. So as you say, you've got the key link between the UK and America, who's dragged into this murky affair, calling a paedophile your best pal, staying at his house while he's in jail.
It's almost suicidal because, you know, yes, I read the part of the news and I read the news every day, but most people in the world know that the Epstein files have been the biggest narrative in American politics. It is taking America by storm. It's on everybody's lips. It's on the tip of everyone's tongue. The American media and the American public are fascinated by this because it played a huge role of the Epstein files going to be printed during the presidential election campaign. So why on God's earth did Sir Keir Starmer go, I know who'd be a great ambassador? Epstein's former best mate. It's crazy. We know that this is a huge story in America. It was sleepwalking into this disaster. I mean, literally, if I was there thinking about who am I going to appoint as American ambassador, so what about Mandelson? He's a good negotiator. The first thing I'd say is, wasn't he Epstein's best mate? Well, you can't do that with all the Epstein stuff kicking off. That would be a crazy decision.
I guess the question is, how much of that did Keir Starmer know? Did he know that Peter Mandelson was Jeffrey Epstein's best pal?
Surely the security services give people briefings when it's going to be ambassador, unless MI5 and MI6 are all just, I don't know, playing backgammon over the other side of the river. I kind of find it incredible to imagine that the dossier on this man, or the, you know, it was a relatively public relationship between these two.
I think you know it's certainly a problem for it's highly embarrassing, and you know we're hearing this morning, you know, that Starmer is still backing him, still has confidence in him, and is obviously just hoping this stuff will go away. I mean, let's be honest, there's a lot of scandals going on at the moment for the Labour Party. He must be thinking this one will blow over, he'll move on to somebody else. And if the Epstein files are ever fully published, there'll be a hell of a lot of crazy stuff in there that will make the Mandelson stuff. He probably wants to. Well, I mean, there will be some excruciating emails, as he mentions in the interview with Harry on YouTube tonight, that will paint him in a bad light, but there'll be a whole galaxy of very famous, very important people who are going to come off a lot worse, I would imagine, and maybe that's the gamble that Keir Starmer is making.
Or maybe it's also part of 4D chess, you know, maybe it's like we'll throw in an Epstein friend in there as some sort of sop to get on the side.
Is there anybody left at senior level in public life or captain of industry who wasn't on Epstein's island?
Yeah, who's not been on that Lolita Express?
Look at the size of that 50th birthday book. It's wider than the Bible. This thing. It's extraordinary.
It's, you know, this story fascinates me. Colin, do come and keep us updated. Oh, it's so much fun having you here. It's been brilliant talking to you. Colin Robinson, head of features at The Sun, and of course a columnist there. Now, of course, you can catch that full interview just from a psychological standpoint. It's a fascinating one to watch, isn't it? On Harry Cole's new YouTube channel, Harry Cole Saves the West. Don't miss it. Right, taking a short break now, but when I'm back after the break, that was Colin just running past the camera there. It wasn't a bat, that was the sort of a black T-shirt of Colin escaping the studio because he's got copy to go and file. Ding! When we come back, we're going to be discussing that the number of British people who are now very sceptical of global warming is soaring. We're going to be speaking to the excellent Ross Clark, columnist at The Sun and author of Not Zero, after this.
Well, Ed Miliband being branded an eco-hypocrite this morning in The Sun as well, because, of course, the Energy Secretary boasted in February that he'd installed a heat pump at his house. Now, I don't know who paid for that, but I can bet your bottom dollar that it was probably us. But it turns out that he's also got another property in Doncaster, South Yorkshire, and it's got a gas boiler in it. And he hasn't replaced the gas boiler. And worse than that, not only has he not replaced the gas boiler, but he's charged us for the bill.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello and welcome back to the show. Now, this doesn't surprise me at all. In fact, I was writing something on something interesting going on in the psyche of the collective British public just last night that I plan on publishing soon, which is all part of, I think, a similar narrative. And this is that the number of British people who think the dangers of global warming have been trumped up has soared by 50% in 4 years. Research shows 1 in 4 voters believe fears about climate change are over-egged, with the cost of net zero policies to blame. Let's speak to Ross Clark about this, columnist at The Sun, also author of Not Zero. I mean, Ross, it's an interesting thing that's happening, I think, in the psyche of the British public in general. Certain events that have happened, and I put net zero at the heart of this, and I was talking in this article I'm writing about the fact that this beatification of Greta Thunberg, this sort of strange schoolgirl going on strike who was invited to the UN and world leaders all wanted their photos taken with her, and we all kind of thought, that's weird, isn't it? She's just an odd kid from Sweden. Why are they turning her into some sort of oracle? You know, the scales have fallen from our eyes because there she is of a Marxist fringe trying to break into Gaza like the lunatic she always was. But then we had COVID and this whole we're following the science, stay in your home. And the narrative kept changing and moving around like a bar of soap in the shower. And where we've ended up now, it seems to me, and of course, you know, the icing on the cake is a man is now a woman. And where we've ended up is the population just saying these people flagrantly lie to us. And I think as a result, the sort of, you know, the religion of net zero is beginning to crumble.
Yeah, well, for years we've been fed this great big fib that net zero is not going to just make us greener, it's going to make us richer as well. It's all going to cut our heating bills. Ed Miliband, let's not forget, promised to cut our heating bills by £300 a year by turning the grid green. And we were told at the same time is going to create all these many thousands of well-paid green jobs, and Britain going early was going to reap the most benefits. And it's all a lie, frankly, and people are beginning to see through it. We have some of the highest energy bills in the world. As for the green jobs, well, we've certainly helped create green jobs, but most of them are in China. You know, here's just a little stat which might sort of help explain how successful Britain has been in getting green jobs. Britain has about 1% of the world's population, but we've got about 0.3% of the, you know, jobs in wind and solar energy. So, you know, we're not reaping the benefits, but at the same time we are increasing our household bills, and we are absolutely now devastating what remains of British industry, heavy industry. Jim Ratcliffe just yesterday was saying, you know, he's not going to invest a single penny more in Britain because of the windfall taxes on oil and gas. Where's he going to invest? In the US instead, which has, you know, unashamedly followed a policy of energy self-sufficiency. Now, I think for years, when the government sort of comforted themselves on that, we had these polls and people were asked, do you support net zero? And when it was just put in that simple, fuzzy terms, people said, yes, I do support net zero, because it sounded vaguely virtuous. But then when the full implications of net zero are coming home, what it means for us personally in terms of our bills, our ability to do things like drive a car or fly away on a summer holiday, people change their minds very, very rapidly. And now we've got 4 years ago, by the way, 51% of people said they were happy to see petrol and diesel cars banned. Now, according to this Times poll, that's now down to 30%. Just 6% of people are prepared to see higher domestic energy bills to pay for net zero. It is absolutely collapsing, and Ed Miliband is so behind the curve on this. It's extraordinary.
I think there's something else going on as well, isn't there? And I think they sort of overdid the hyperbole and the alarmism. I kind of feel it's a bit like boy who cried wolf syndrome when they kept saying the Earth's on fire. It is the climate catastrophe, they kept saying. We started naming storms. Oh, here comes Storm Norman, everyone. You've got to be careful. And guess what? All you got was a bit of newspaper fluttering in the wind. And then, of course, they've now got this new emergency siren on the phone for extreme weather events. And you're like, what? Because it's drizzling and the dinner ladies need to get the kids in from the playground. I think they sort of, the madness and also the capture of academia when all these people are supposed to be the brightest and the best, who receive huge grants to do their research, get dragged into patent anti-scientific nonsense like the gender debate. And the public are sitting there going, we don't know who to trust anymore. They're telling us the world's on fire. I'm looking out the window. It isn't. They're telling me a man is a woman. I'm pretty sure that's not true. And so I think all of these things, and I think it's created such a dangerous situation where no one can anymore see the wood from the trees, where people spot conspiracy lurking in the shadows everywhere, where we live in this post-truth world. And if a government did want to honestly and effectively communicate with its people, that sort of sacred bond of trust has been forever broken.
Yeah, well, let's be fair on the climate stuff. I mean, there is good data to say that the Earth is warming. It's about 1 Celsius warmer on average than it was in the middle of the last century. In Britain, the climate's got a bit wetter as well, about 10% extra rainfall. We also get more sunshine and we get less wind and less extreme wind as well. But it's when we get to this link with extreme weather that the whole thing tends to fall apart, and we get all sorts of lazy claims to be made. And I've lost count of the number of times when we've had a storm and people sort of tell us, government ministers and so on tell us, oh, we're going to see more of this sort of weather in future due to climate change, when the real world data shows exactly the opposite. There is a downward trend in the prevalence of extreme storms in Britain, and we're actually seeing less damage from the wind, not more damage. The climate's very, very interesting. It's changing in all sorts of different ways, but the sort of idea that it's all cataclysm is just so it's just removed from reality, and I think people are beginning to see through that.
Yeah, it's like this year apparently was the hottest summer on records, but I remember like a couple of years ago when it peaked 40 degrees. It didn't do that this year, and you're kind of like, Ross, thank you ever so much. It's always great catching up with you. Ross is a fantastic journalist and an awesome columnist for The Sun newspaper. Right, we're going to be taking a short break now, but Common Sense has come back. Oh my goodness, I can't believe it. Someone has said that police should stop charging offensive and charge the criminal instead. Well, that's a good idea, isn't it? It's about time that happened. Here we go. Let's all welcome the return of Common Sense after this break.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there. Right, before we progress on to our next topic of conversation, let's take some calls, shall we? This is Tarquin. Hello, Tarquin.
Storm Alexandra, this is Storm Tarquin.
Ah, I love it. You know, Storm Alexandra, no one should wish that upon themselves, I'll tell you that much.
I suppose so. Yeah, listen, this man, Mandelson, I mean, those of us who are old enough have memories. We remember Oleg Deripaska, we remember the Hinduja brothers, we remember Jeffrey Robertson, and now pray we have Jeffrey Epstein. Is form here, darling?
Well, this is it. This is what I'm saying, Tarquin. This whole mea culpa, I was duped. I didn't. It's like, hold on, that doesn't pass muster. But the big question for me, right? Tarquin, shall we stop a moment and get a little bit of tinfoil, shape it into a strange boat shape and adorn our skulls with it? Because I think it's time for tinfoil hat theory. Because I cannot, I mean, like I was saying to Colin earlier, if I was appointing the American ambassador, knowing the Epstein files was one of the biggest news stories in America, I would go, oh yeah, I used to know Jeffrey Epstein, probably not a good pick. I mean, it's so blimmin' obvious that you should not be putting Mandelson into that position that I have to think, well, maybe they've done it deliberately. Maybe it's almost like some sort of, you're our best ally and here's a bit of mutually assured destruction. If stuff comes out on you, we will look after you because stuff could come out on him as well.
Absolutely, and as my Baco foil crown topples to one slide, other brands are available. I would say also that there's a couple of strands and nuances to this too, Alex. I think possibly that Mandelson was sent in by TB, Tony Blair, sorry, not tuberculosis, and was sent to get over there, and Starmer didn't have much say in that, get over there, keep your eye on Trump, because he's not one of us. He's not one of us globalist, Marxist, Fabian loons. So you get, and Peter thought, oh yes, and I'm going to set up my own company, Peter Mandelson Global Consulting, whatever his private, he set his own private office up in Washington. So he's going to maybe be able to get a few, after dinner speaking gigs, some consultancy. So it's all self-serving primarily. But of course he's doing for the cause. Yes, TB, I will do. But I think it calls into question Starmer's integrity as well. His position, not just Mandelson's position, is now untenable. Starmer's is too. I think they should both be sacked, but of course they won't sack themselves. So in the court of public opinion, I think they should be dragged off to the cells kicking and screaming now.
Well, there you go. That is what we seem to be doing today on Talk. Tarquin, I loved your eloquence today. That was it was almost thespian. Every time you call, can you do it like that? Because I enjoy that sort of creativity and colour on the airwaves. And basically, I think you're better than me. I think, if you put in a performance like that again, I'm going to be out of a job and you're going to be on the throne instead. Tarquin, thank you ever so much for your call. Let's quickly now as well speak to Tony, who is in North Wales. Bore da.
Bore da, Him.
Well, I don't know what that second bit means. I got as far as Bore da when I lived in Wales, and that's it, unfortunately.
It means good morning to you, my love, which is quite remarkable because I'm not actually Welsh, but there we are.
Well, you've done well to pick up that language that has no vowels in it. I'll tell you what, I tried a little bit and I just gave up. I thought Mandarin might be easier.
Lots of phlegm and plenty of practice, you'll get there.
Right, what can I do you for today? What is on your mind?
So what's on my mind? I was listening to the interview between Mandelson and, Cole. What's his face?
Harry Cole. He's our what's his face.
I'm so sorry.
That's all right.
Where Mandelson described Jeffrey Epstein as a charismatic lying criminal, or charismatic criminal liar. To be honest with you, Alex, in my view, so is he. And the reason I say that is because I worked for the lender, and I'll be vague, naturally, from whom he got his mortgage for the purchase of this property in London. One of the questions on it is, are you borrowing any other money in relation to the purchase of this property? To which he answered no. Now, that is a risk-based question, naturally, because if you're borrowing more money, it creates a higher risk for the lender and it makes them look more closely at you. So if you say no, they're just going to move on. £250,000 or 275,000 is quite a considerable liability, however it's arranged. So there is a word for what he did there, and that is, or an expression rather, and that's mortgage fraud. Mortgage fraud is a criminal offence.
Wow, we're going down some interesting avenues today, by the way. I cannot get a right of reply live on air. So look, I'm the journalist. I've got to qualify this and I've got to sort of look after myself. I don't want Ofcom coming after me, son. Yeah, I mean, I suppose what you were saying, if I was going to sum up, is as fishy as, well, it's not fishy, as patently evil and horrible and manipulative Epstein is, there is a similar dark cloud that has always hung over Mandelson, and I think a lot of people would be minded to agree with that. Oh, I've just remembered some Welsh there, Tony, which is Diolch yn fawr. Thank you for coming on the show. Right, let us, and I love that, what's his face in Washington, our very own Harry Cole. Like I said, you can watch that interview. It's a psychologically fascinating piece of theatre, at the very least, on Harry Cole Saves the West on YouTube. Right, from one Harry to another, because I'm joined now by Harry Miller, who's a former police officer and founder of Fair Cop. Good morning, Harry. I mean, thankfully, somebody has come out and said the blimmin' obvious. This is Sir Andy Cook, who is His Majesty's Chief Inspector of the Constabulary. He said that police need to use common sense. People should be able to speak openly without fear that their opinion will put them on the wrong side of the law. And he has called for non-crime hate incidents to be scrapped, saying officers must separate the offensive from the criminal. I mean, thank goodness someone in the police has come out and said this, because, I mean, I just wonder operationally, when the command is given, you know, or can 5 officers at Heathrow Airport who happen to carry, you know, automatic weapons or whatever it is in the line of duty, because that's what they have to do at airports, can you go and lift this man on off an aeroplane for a tweet? Does someone go, that's not a good thing to do, that's a bit dystopian and weird? Why is it taking him so long?
Well, that's a very interesting question. You know, you talked earlier about is this a brand new dawn of common sense? Well, we've had too many false dawns, unfortunately. I thought I'd settled this in 2019, and then in 2021, when I took the government at the College of Policing to the High Court and won. As far as I was concerned, that was going to be the end of these wretched things, this scourge on society, the doubly Orwellian non-crime hate incident, which meant that you had a record irrespective of whether or not you committed a crime. In fact, there needed to be no evidence whatsoever. All it needed was somebody to say, you've been talking hurty words and I perceive it as hate, and that was it. You had a record. I would much rather be accused of a crime than a non-crime, because when it comes to a crime, then the burden of proof is on the state. I have to go, you know, I've got to go, I go before a judge or a jury or what have you, and the onus is on the state to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that I have committed a criminal offence. Not so with non-crime hate incidents. They just point the finger and that is it. Now, what we have here, we have a dark matter of resistance in our country. And this dark matter is called the College of Policing. Sensible chief constables, sensible officers, repeated Home Secretaries, former chief constables, they've all said there is no evidence that non-crime hate incidents work. In fact, there is plenty of evidence that they do the opposite of work. They actually perpetuate and create hate. But unfortunately, the College of Policing thinks it's the Vatican. And Nick Herbert, the chair of the College of Policing, thinks he's the Pope. And he treats non-crime hate incidents as though they were a religious dogma. And it is their job to operate an inquisition over anybody who tries to get rid of them, who wants to apply a touch of rationality to these things, because they have become an article of faith. Now, I'm looking forward to seeing how our new Home Secretary gets on this one. A lot of people don't like her. I'm prepared to give her the chance. I think she's a hard, smart woman, and I really hope that she gets stuck in to the College of Policing, because becoming the Home Secretary, she's now owner of the College of Policing, by the way. She is the single shareholder of the College of Policing. I want her to go in there and I want her to shut it down. That is the only way, as far as I can see, that we are going to get back to a position of common sense, that we are going to get back and return this great nation to a position where you are free to think, speak, say, where you can use rhetorical flourishes without the police coming onto your doorstep, armed or unarmed or what have you, and taking you in for some sort of non-crime hate incident. So I'm putting a lot of faith in Mrs. Mahmood right now, and I hope she doesn't let us down.
I mean, it's interesting, actually, because it sort of brings me back to the buck passing that has happened so often between the government and the police, with Sir Mark Rowley really sort of at times. There was that incident when the whole sort of accusations of two-tier in the wake of Southport happened, and he was going to number 10, and he looked very, very cross indeed. But there's been this buck passing with the police saying, look, it's not our fault. Governments have created all this rubbish legislation, and the government sort of saying, well, every time the police turn up, you know, on someone's ring doorbell saying we're coming to raid your house because you've got a Douglas Murray book or whatever it is, going, well, that's a bit of an overstep. You shouldn't be doing that. And I kind of think, you know, the idea of a non-crime hate incident is sort of titularly self-explanatory. Non-crime. Nothing to do with crime. The police should have nothing to do with that. It's a bit like, oh, well, this is a non-medical event. Let's take it to A&E. But where do you think the buck does stop? Are police able, you know, when they're sitting there and determining operational duties, or, you know, someone phones up and goes, I saw something on X and I feel triggered. I feel like I'm in an unsafe space. Who makes the decision? Does the police go, well, because it's reported, I've now got to follow this process, and because of this process, the law says I've got to do this. So if we don't respond and go and knock on this person's door, then we could then be accused of not following up this crime and da-da-da-da-da. And they end up sort of stuck on rails towards the inevitable. Or is there some discretion with this? Could an operational, you know, commander turn around and go, that ain't a thing, that's someone trying to bully and intimidate someone and using the police as their vehicle by which to do so. We want to take no part in this. Because it seems to me the government constantly buck shift to the police and the police to the government.
Yeah, absolutely. There is no requirement at all for the police to investigate something which the normal, common, rational-minded person thinks is nonsense. There is no requirement whatsoever. In fact, there is a requirement for them not to investigate. We have this thing called Article 10. It guarantees us the ability to speak and say things without interference from the state, that is the police, unless they have good and solid due course. I really like Emma Nicholson, Baroness Nicholson of Winterburn. Now, that's a name that sounds like she should have dragons possibly at a castle. When Sir Mark Rowley moaned and complained that what he needed was the government to give them more laws and guidance, what she said was poppycock, absolute poppycock. We don't need more guidance. We need the police to reacquaint themselves with British law and simply to promote and uphold that. And where it is a malicious, where it is a political claim, where it is simply somebody stirring up trouble in the name of some crazy woke ideology, then the police should say, not having anything to do with it. And I also say this, that individual police officers, not simply inspectors, superintendents, chief constables and the commissioner, individual police constables should say, hold on a minute, we are not doing this. I am not required to obey an unlawful order. That's what needs to happen. We've tried appealing to the top and for it to come from the top down. I think it's going to have to start now from the bottom up. I think individual officers are going to have to take some responsibility and simply say, no, if you want me to go and do that, I want a written order sent to me, and then I'm going to take that written order and I'm going to give it to the press. That's what needs to happen. But I am not going to do it. I am not going to interfere with people's rights.
Wow, well, that a brave strategy, and sort of good luck to any officers who have the sort of gumption and the guts to do that, because I'm sure many of them are actually quite worried for their careers and being hounded out of office. But I think you're right, you know, we all have to have personal agency in the world that we live. And if someone said to me, oh, Alex, on your show today, can you say X, Y and Z that I knew was patently untrue or deeply harmful, I hope I would have the courage to say, I ain't doing that. No, thanks. So, Harry, I think you make a very valid point. Thank you ever so much for your insights. I feel we're having a very sort of verbose and florid programme today. We've got amazing speakers using all sorts of vernacular and vocabulary. And I feel like I'm doing it myself. It's like a race to the top. How Shakespearean can we get? Right, well, let's find out after the break, shall we? We're going to be talking about language, actually, and the use of language. Here we go. It's the same old trope from the left. Did you know a narcissist is very likely to actually project onto someone else and call them the narcissist? I think it's the same with fascists, so it doesn't surprise me that John McDonnell has likened Nigel Farage to Adolf Hitler. We're discussing that after the break.
They're not just a family, they're an institution. And I love the monarchy. I believe in the monarchy from afar, from a foreign country that fought a war not to have it. And they can't, it's not just about a family, it's about protecting the future of the monarchy and the institution for not only Prince William, but Prince George. King Charles knows that he's jeopardizing that with any sort of meeting with Prince Harry.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Do you know, I just got very excited and almost ripped off poor little Ted's limbs because he came into the studios with a piece of paper and said the words Lord Hermer. And I get very excited when I see that name because he's the man I love to hate the most. Apparently, he said there should be no tension between taking tough, unnecessary measures dealing with immigration. Emphasizing the country has extraordinary, diverse, multicultural society. He thinks it behooves us in all of our language to be very clear about that. We've seen some of the dangers when we're not, blah, blah. Anyway, we're going to be discussing Lord Homer shortly. I love talking about him. He is the man I love to hate the most. Not far behind him, though, is good old John McDonnell. You remember him, the former Shadow Chancellor? He was always knocking about with old Jezza Corbyn. He has appeared to compare Nazis' attitude towards Jews to Reform's view of asylum seekers. He's labelled Nigel Farage as a demagogue. He's likened him to Adolf Hitler. He's called Reform UK a fascist organisation. Speaking at a fringe event at the Trades Union Conference on Tuesday, he said Reform are a proto-fascist organisation. We've seen it in the 30s. All of that again. Shall we speak to what someone from Reform and find out what they think about this? Here's Orla. She is a Reform councillor candidate for Epping. Good morning to you.
Good morning. How are you, Alex?
I'm all right, my darling. How are you?
Good.
You little fascist, you Nazi, you racist. Look at you.
All of the above. All of the above.
Aren't you a monster? I mean, the thing I find so astonishing about this is the people who want to shut down the debate, the people who want to censor us, the people who gaslight us and tell us lies, the people who try and evade democracy, the people who demonise anybody with a different political opinion are the very people calling everybody else the fascists.
Much back to your point about being a narcissist. You're a narcissist, you point out the narcissism in somebody else. It's ironic. You know, the thing is, McDonnell is the godfather of Labour, him alongside Corbyn, you know, and these people you just can't, we know, you try and have a decent conversation with them and an open conversation about their views, and they shout Nazi, fascist, blah, 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 the same thing all the time. You know, over the last few months, I've been very busy with the protests in Epping outside the Bell, and that's the rhetoric you always get. The left always throw that at you. The irony is, a fascist is somebody who is believes in authoritarian dictatorship, suppresses the opposition, rejects democracy. I mean, that's Starmer. I mean, that is Starmer in a nutshell. So it's absolutely bizarre that they call Farage a fascist when Starmer is the ultimate fascist.
I mean, what's interesting about this, it actually takes me back to what I've just been reading that Hermer has said here, where he talks about we have to be, I'll say what he says verbatim. I think it behoves us all in our language to be very clear about the fact we have an extraordinary, diverse, multicultural society, because we have seen in recent weeks some of the dangers when we are not, of our minority communities feeling fear and under threat. Now, what I think that people aren't talking about enough is when you have people like the Socialist Workers' Party saying, stamp on the necks of the fascists, Nazi scum off our streets, calling people dangerous, basically saying that these are monstrous human beings who are an existential threat to human life, what that provokes in reaction is so dangerous. I remember as a Brexit Party MEP being dragged over to College Green where you had that bozo with the megaphone, Steve Bray, paid-for activist, and the legacy media loved it. They had their scaffolding set up. They liked all the sort of mad mob with their berets, you know, the people who are too old to go to Glastonbury Festival, who should probably learn some embroidery or join the WI instead, and, you know, doing hullabaloo and adult rag week to try and reverse Brexit. But I was having chunks of hair pulled out. I was being spat on. I needed a police escort to that interview at the height of Brexit. And my fear is when people like McDonald say Nigel Farage is Hitler, it is, to me, a dog whistle for some lunatic out there, like that Crooks one who tried to shoot Donald Trump, to try and put a bullet between his eyes, to some mad leftist thinking that actually stopping reform, physically harming reform, you know, or anybody who represents them, is a perfectly justifiable and valid target because they'll be saving the planet by doing so. I think this stuff is so dangerous.
It is dangerous. It is dangerous. And people, you know, we talk about this, and I've been on various shows on talkTV talking about this. Most people who are looking to vote reform, who are voting reform or standing for reform, are normal, everyday people, most of which have never been in politics before, but have seen what is happening to this country, have seen, you know, the unfairness, have seen the fact that our very people, the British taxpayers, have been put at the back of the queue, that are that are the ones that are suffering. You know, they're the ones. So we're the people that are standing up and saying, we've had enough of this. You know, reform are our only. People feel that reform are the last chance, the only chance that we have to get some kind of, you know, normality back to the craziness that has happened in the last few years. But what happens is, as you say, someone like McDonald says something absolutely outrageous, comparing Nigel to Hitler, and then some nutter turns up and attacks somebody like me, somebody like a lady that's standing outside one of the hotels, you know, trying to promote the fact that, or not promote, but, you know, trying to bring attention to the fact that these men in these hotels are illegal, you know, migrants that have come in with no documentation. We don't know who they are. So concern about their children and the well-being of their communities. And suddenly you're a target for a left-wing nutcase who then throws things at you, you know, verbally and physically, and makes you out to be a monster. So they're demonizing. Can
you say stuff like that, Orla? Because you've been at the heart of these protests in Epping Forest. Have you felt scared?
Oh my God. Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, not just when we've been there and there's been counter-protesters, which there has been, and they shout horrendous things and shout at the kids and, you know, call you every name under the sun. Put that aside. But even online, you know, or many of us get absolutely horrendous insults and threats online. Why? What? Because we're saying, oh, actually, 31,000 men have come across the channel this year. We don't know who they are. And yesterday, in a court, a 5-year-old girl, or a Sudanese man was up for raping a 5-year-old girl. And we're the monsters?
Ola, seriously, it worries me. I do feel like we live in a dystopian world, and the fascists are calling everyone else the fascists.
Correct, absolutely. And it's, as you say, it's dangerous. It's just so wrong. It is dangerous. Another way round.
Yeah. At some point, I mean, look, we had this sort of flurry, didn't we, after the assassination attempt on Donald Trump, and everyone went, look, this has been provoked by the left with all the things that they say, and they're back at it again. Orla, thank you ever so much for joining me. It's been fantastic talking to you. I just want to say this, right? Lord Hermer and your cohort, there are people who are afraid in this country to show who they are and what they believe. And there are people who think they're going to be persecuted for their creed. There are people who are scared if they wear symbols of their belief. And those people might be from minority communities, but those people are also from the right wing of politics. Because people who backed Brexit dared not speak out for fear they might lose their jobs. People who might want to vote reform live in fear of being ostracised by their community and their family and their friends because of the way you portray them. The general public are frightened to write things on social media that might sound right-wing because they could end up in prison. And believe you me, politicians on the right wing of politics are very afraid afraid of personal physical attacks against them when people like John McDonnell call them fascist. It's dangerous. Stop it. OK, after the break, it's PMQs with Kevin O'Sullivan. See you in just a moment.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back to the show. Without further ado, let's project you right now into the House of Commons because it is Prime Minister's questions.
Until there's a just and lasting peace. Mr. Speaker, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others. In addition to my duties in this House, I shall have further such meetings later today.
Just to say to the House, I've sent a letter on behalf of Parliament, a letter of condolence to the royal family on behalf of the sad news of the Duchess of Kent. Right, let us come back to Dr. Luke Evans.
Here, 1 year on, the country's seen a Transport Secretary resign over fraud, an anti-corruption minister investigated for corruption, a homelessness minister make tenants homeless, and a housing secretary not pay tax on her second house. Prime Minister, we've also had a Prime Minister who accepted more freebies than any other MP in the last Parliament. Is this the integrity he meant when he came to government?
Well, Mr. Speaker, here's the difference. I strengthened the ministerial code. I strengthened the independent adviser. The Deputy Prime Minister referred herself to the adviser. It was a clear finding, and she did the right thing. Mr. Speaker, contrast that with the Shadow Foreign Secretary. She was found to have broken the code under the last government. What did the Prime Minister do then, Mr. Speaker? He ignored that. There was a resignation, but that was the resignation of the adviser, not the person who's found to have breached the code. And she still sits on their front bench. That is the difference.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. After almost 2 decades of the SNP and 14 years of the Tories, Kirkcaldy High Street has been in a state of decline.
Won't be in this chamber.
Thank you, Mr. Mr. Speaker, after almost 2 decades of the SNP and 14 years of the Tories, Kirkcaldy High Street has been in a state of decline. That's why the Chancellor was right to prioritise Kirkcaldy for multi-million-pound regeneration funding from the new Growth Mission Fund to build on the enormous potential of our town and beautiful seafront. Does the Prime Minister agree that investment over decline is key to this Labour government, and will he ask the new Business Secretary to meet with me to discuss this funding?
Well, I thank her for her question. She's been a tireless campaigner for investment into High Street. Mr. Speaker, I can give her good news because thanks to funding committed by the Chancellor and this Labour government, I can confirm today that, subject to business case approval, we will approve millions to transform Kirkcaldy's High Street and seafront. I will, of course, make sure she gets the meeting she wants with the Business Secretary. The SNP have squandered the potential of these high streets for 2 decades. Next year, people can vote for positive change with a Scottish Labour government.
We come to the Leader of the Opposition, Kemi Bernard.
Mr. Speaker, can I associate myself with the comments the Prime Minister made about the Duchess of Kent? She lived an exemplary life of public service and she will be very much missed. And I also agree with the Prime Minister, as should all of us in this House. We stand shoulder to shoulder with Poland and all our NATO allies against Putin's aggression. A NATO country has just had to defend itself against Russian drones. Now, more than ever, we need our ambassador to Washington fully focused on this issue and liaising closely with America. Does the Prime Minister have full confidence in Peter Mandelson?
Mr. Speaker, let me start by saying the victims of Epstein are at the forefront of our minds. He was a despicable criminal who committed the most heinous crimes and destroyed the lives of so many women and girls. The ambassador has repeatedly expressed his deep regret for his association with him. He's right to do so. I have confidence in him, and he's playing an important role in the UK-US relationship.
This is interesting, Mr. Speaker. He says the ambassador has expressed full regret, but the victims of the paedophile Jeffrey Epstein have called for Lord Mandelson to be sacked. And just so the House is aware, in 2019, Jeffrey Epstein was convicted of child prostitution and sex trafficking that took place between 2002 and 2005. That is the precise period which Lord Mandelson called Jeffrey Epstein his best pal. Absolutely. Was the Prime Minister aware of this intimate relationship when he appointed Lord Mandelson to be our ambassador in Washington?
Mr. Speaker, as she and the House would expect, full due process was followed during this appointment, as it is with all ambassadors. The ambassador has repeatedly expressed his deep regret. He is right to do so. He's now playing an important part in the US-UK relationship.
Mr. Speaker, I asked the Prime Minister if he knew. The fact that he didn't answer indicates that he probably did know. I wasn't asking a question about process. I was asking a question about his judgment. The Daily Telegraph reports today that while Lord Mandelson was Business Secretary, he brokered a deal with Jeffrey Epstein while he was Business Secretary, and that this occurred after Epstein had been convicted of child sex offences. Given this new information, does the Prime Minister really think it is tenable for our ambassador to remain in post?
Mr. Speaker, the relationship between the US and the UK is one of our foremost relationships, and I have confidence in the ambassador in the role that he is doing.
Mr. Speaker, I think it is embarrassing that the Prime Minister is still saying that he has confidence in a man who was brokering deals with convicted child sex offenders while sitting in government. That is a disgrace. This government has repeatedly refused to declare Lord Mandelson's full interests. And as part of the appointment, there will have been extensive government vetting, including details and timings of Peter Mandelson's dealings with Jeffrey Epstein. So will the Prime Minister publish all these documents, including those about his interests?
Well, Mr. Speaker, as I say, full due process was gone through in relation to this appointment, as would be expected. As for the publication of documents, as she well knows, that's subject to a procedure which includes an independent element. Be subject to the usual procedure.
Kevin Murdoch.
The Prime Minister cannot answer any questions. That is not the behaviour of someone who has full confidence. The ambassador should be in the White House talking about how we respond to an incursion into NATO airspace. Instead, he is giving interviews about himself to The Sun. This is a man who already had to be removed from cabinet twice, and now we learn that he was brokering billion-pound deals with Jeffrey Epstein while business secretary. I didn't get a proper answer. He's talking about process. This is not about process. This is about judgment. Just last week, I told him that he should sack his deputy prime minister. They all cheered and congratulated themselves. She was gone 2 days later. His phase 2 is broken, and he's got a totally new front bench. So I will ask him again, will he make sure that these documents are published, and will he actually instruct Peter Mandelson to publish all his correspondence with Jeffrey Epstein?
Well, she says the ambassador should be in the White House discussing NATO. He is, as we all are, with a number of international calls this morning and on Ukraine, as well as the attack in Doha yesterday. Mr. Speaker, I see she's finally catching up with the questions that she should have asked last week about the Deputy Prime Minister. In the meantime, Mr. Speaker, we have been opened up a new schools-based nursery. On Monday, we had the Defence Industrial Strategy. On Tuesday, we published NHS league tables to push up standards. We reopened Doncaster and Sheffield Airport yesterday. And today, we've set out how we're repairing the concrete in our hospitals.
A load of waffle and whataboutery, Mr. Speaker. All they are interested right now is their pointless deputy leadership election while the country is out there suffering from an economic crisis. The Prime Minister has an ambassador mired in scandal, not focusing on NATO. He lost his Deputy Prime Minister just last week for evading taxes. He's got a new Home Secretary, a new Foreign Secretary, just learning the ropes, not able to help with this issue. We have strikes crippling our capital city and damaging our economy. He could use minimum service legislation, which we introduced, to make the lives of the people out there better, but he won't, because he does not have the backbone to face down the unions. The unions are running this government. All the deputy leadership candidates are chasing after them. And while with this government, it is more strikes, more scandal, more chaos. And the link, Mr. Speaker, isn't the link between all of this his bad decisions, his bad judgment, and his total weakness.
Mr. Speaker, our Deputy Leader contest started this week and ends on the 25th of October. Their leadership contest has been going on for months and will continue for a very long time. And all this noise from the arsonists whilst we're putting out the fires that they left behind. Interest rates and waiting lists, Mr. Speaker, down. Wages, investment and deportations up. And now we're stepping up defence spending, creating new jobs, driving up standards in our NHS and rebuilding our crumbling schools and hospitals. This is a government of patriots fighting for working people.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This Labour government is getting our NHS back on its feet.
Wow, that turned out to be spicier than I expected. And can I just say, it seems to me Kemi Badenoch was on fire then. Slippery Starmer squirming, really unable to answer those questions. I think this story is going to roll on. And she was picking up on what I was saying. What did they know? He kept saying full dutiful process was followed in the hiring of Lord Mandelson. Well, they would have known he was mates with Jeffrey Epstein, so why appoint him? Did Starmer know? He couldn't answer the question. All he can ever say, that man is process, international law, proper process. The man can't do politics. And she pointed out, didn't she? You fell into this trap with Angela Rayner. You're falling into the trap again. Let's speak with the one and only brilliant Mr. Kevin O'Sullivan, who was also watching from his cave. I mean, Kev, there was a massive target there on Starmer's back, quite frankly, but I felt she didn't miss a shot. Good on her.
I'll tell you what, Alex, that is the very first time that I've been impressed by Kemi Badenoch. She played a blinder there, absolutely skewered the Prime Minister, who had no answers whatsoever. He is guilty, quite clearly, of an egregious lack of judgment in appointing Peter Mandelson. There's something about Peter Mandelson that I don't understand. He just lurches from one scandal to the next. He was sacked by Tony Blair, not once, but twice, and still came back to the political foreground. And now, despite his extremely dodgy past, despite the fact that Keir Starmer well knew about his friendship with Jeffrey Epstein, Starmer appoints him to the role of our most important diplomat.
Did you not think that is the craziest thing on planet Earth? And when it comes to Mandelson, you have to start asking yourself the question, what does he know about everybody? Do you know what I mean? To be able to sort of keep having these political lives.
Let me tell you something, Alex. Here's the confusion for me about Peter Mandelson is, yes, how come he keeps getting mired in the most atrocious scandals? Usually he's on the make himself. You know, you remember the Jeffrey Robinson loan, the Notting Hill Gate scandal, as it was called, and then the Hadija brothers passport scandal. Fired, comes back, and now he's come back again. Now, the thing about this guy is, why do these scandals never stick to him? And how come he's done so well in life? Because this man, in his entire political career, has never once been right about anything. He is always wrong. And there he is as our man in Washington. And do you know why I suspect, why I fear he'll survive this?
Why?
Is because if Starmer fires him, it will make this murky, dreadful situation look even worse.
I agree with you there, but I think if they keep hammering this, if they keep pushing for any correspondence between Mandelson and Epstein to be released, because this is what they've been doing in America, as you well know, the calls for the publication of the Epstein files is a massive thing over there. It drowns out lots of the rest of the news agenda. It's become a bit of a thorn in the side of Donald Trump, quite frankly. After Pam Bondi said, I've seen a list, and then all of a sudden there isn't a list. But to me, what I don't understand here, what I really don't understand is, point one, we all knew that the Epstein files was a massive thing over in America. We followed that election campaign. We watched the sort of narratives that were the sort of the dominating factors. And so we knew Jeffrey Epstein was a big story. Point two, people knew that Mandelson was always hanging out with Epstein. So it was obvious to me that if you were going, who should we appoint as ambassador? You go, well, it better not be that Epstein, mate, because in the future that's going to become ugly. I cannot see how that decision was taken without that being discussed, which then leads me on to thinking, why did they take it anyway? Because this has all come out at the worst possible time. Donald Trump's coming over for a state visit. It's going to be overshadowed now if politically the Conservative Party decide they want to go down this route, or Reform, or the Lib Dems, or whoever else. They want to go down this route of pushing for the publication of correspondence between Mandelson and Epstein, the business deals that they did together. If people just keep carrying on with that, and I can't see why they wouldn't, that's it. State visit, out comes the letter of invitation from the lapel, means nothing now. Gone. Yeah. Done.
Yeah, exactly. Now, what this reveals, once again, is that Keir Starmer it may well be one of the worst politicians I've ever seen in my life. He is very, very bad at this. He cannot see the dangers ahead. Now, in appointing Mandelson, he should have spotted this Epstein relationship. It's going to be a problem. The worst of it, as Kemi Badenoch brilliantly pointed out, was this guy, when business secretary, brokered $1 billion deal with Epstein after Epstein was convicted of child sex offences.
Right.
I mean, you know, how do you get out of that? As I just said, what I fear here is Starmer will go to the ends of the earth to protect this guy, because to fire him will make this situation look even worse. But
do you think so? Because I think it's going to play out like the Rayner thing, that he's going to get political pressure and he'll find some sort of way to delegate this. Well, I've sent this off to the office of, you know, making sure Mandelson's okay after all. You know, he'll get somebody to look into it, wait for a report and do what the report says, because that is the only tool that he has in his rather empty toolbox, considering he's the son of a toolmaker.
Yeah, no, exactly right. And he will always fall back on procedure. By the way, stand by for that irritating little man, Darren Jones. What is he? The Chief Secretary of the Prime Minister. He will soon crop up on telly later today, say, the important thing to realise about Peter Mandelson is due procedure was followed at all times. We don't care about the
How rubbish is our due procedure then? Because I was saying earlier, I'm pretty worried about what MI5 and MI6 are up to if they're not going, this appointee Hartley to be America ambassador, the most critical ambassador in the entire world for Britain, right? This isn't just the ambassador to Uzbekistan. This is our closest ally at a time of great geopolitical uncertainty. It's a sort of fractious relationship anyway, given the past history and the footprint of things that people on the Labour front benches have said about Trump. It is necessary that UK and the US are in lockstep right now. This is one of the most critical governmental appointments. And so you would think that our security services and our intelligence services created documents and created a brief to say, whoever you choose, we've done our digging, these could be the fallibilities. And when I see Mandelson, I think that this is a man who is easily armed, twisted and duped into sort of letting go of sensible decision-making and the moral compass as soon as a luxurious lifestyle is put in front of him, which if you were vetting somebody to go and even, I don't know, sweep the floor at GCHQ, you'd be like, oh, well, this person could be a little bit vulnerable to exploitation and bribery. So either the people over there who are supposed to be looking after the nation's security are failing in their job, or they've sent those reports and their recommendations to Sir Keir Starmer, who's decided to flagrantly ignore them.
Absolutely. And if the Tories play their cards right, and Reform and all the opposition parties, if they play their cards right, I think it could be another Rayner. In other words, Starmer will cling on as long as he can until breaking point, and Mandelson may have to go. At that point, I mean, the questions surrounding Starmer's competence will be off the scale. I mean, this is extraordinary. This is extraordinary. He should never have given that guy the job. What do rich people know about Peter Mandelson? What did Epstein know about him? What did the Hinduja brothers know about him? What did Jeffrey Robinson know about him? They knew this about Peter Mandelson, that if you give him a few quid and you pay for a luxury holiday, he is in your pocket. He'll do anything he can for you. The guy is bribable, extremely bribable, and here he is, as you say, in the most important diplomatic role in Britain's arena, and it's a disgrace.
If I was America, I would be calling for him to go. I would see him, like you said, as a really loose cannon, as a dangerous cog to have as part of the machine of the special relationship. And when you think about it, Lord Darragh, who was our American ambassador, lost his job for much less. He lost his job because a private email was leaked where he basically said unpleasant things about the Trump administration. This is even worse. If I was Trump right now, or JD Vance or whoever else, I would be saying, do you know what, this Mandelson guy, it ain't a good look, Britain. Move him on.
I agree with that. The only thing I think about Trump's attitude to Mandelson, Trump's a very rich man. He's a billionaire. Rich men like Peter Mandelson because you can buy him off. And Trump may like this little bribable puppet in the ambassador's house in Washington. So Trump may go, but Trump's attitude to Mandelson is not the problem. The problem is the caliber of the man that we have in the ambassador's house in Washington. The caliber of this man is of the lowest order. It's of the lowest order. How he keeps rising to the top is a total mystery. As I say, apart from the scandals that he lurches from one to the other, his entire checkered career, punctuated by these dreadful scandals that he comes back from. He's never been right about it.
Right.
Anything. He's politically unastute. He's not very good. And here he is in this top role. As I say, if the Tories, if Kemi can build on her best performance at PMQs so far, and continue that line of attack, give us the documents, show us what you knew, it may well be that Mandelson will be forced out of office.
Right.
Don't forget, this is what happened with Angela Rayner. Old Starmer clung on, then she had to go. Did you notice that extraordinary moment where Starmer is berating Kemi Badenoch for not asking him the right questions about Angela Rayner? Earlier.
Couldn't make it up. I'll tell you what, though, regarding Mandelson, before we move on to another grim personality, he's not just damaged goods. He's radioactive waste. Do you know what I mean? He's radioactive waste. Let's talk now about, it's a man I love to hate, because actually it's not so much hate. he scares me. It's Lord Hermer. Let's have a little clip of what he said earlier.
Germany has agreed to amend its own domestic law to deal with the problem of the transport of boat materials through Germany to the beaches on France. Now, it is inconceivable that our partners would have entered into those agreements if we were not members of the Council of Europe, if we were not signed up to the European Convention on Human Rights. To leave, as some people are now advocating, to leave would be entirely counterproductive if what we are seeking is not rhetorical answers, but real practical answers. If we leave, those deals go. No one's going to enter agreements to us if we're not complying with the same standards across the immigration and asylum system. It would be contrary to the national interest. It would be impractical. And of course, it would do, I think, great damage to this country's long fought for reputation as a leader in international law. And I hope I get an opportunity a little later on to talk some more about that.
What is her obsession?
Please don't talk more about it. Please don't talk. That man is a cretin.
Yes.
That man is a cretin. We have massive problems with him. What him and Starmer need to get into their dim, thick heads is the law is an ass. It is not your God. For them, it is the Lord God Almighty, international law. And what's he talking about there? If we weren't in the ECHR, we couldn't do a deal about boat parts with Germany. Oh, great. Let's stay in the ECHR. What the hell do we get out?
Exactly. He's talking absolute rubbish.
Good about it.
Talking absolute rubbish. We see time and again. I mean, this latest scandal now, the asylum seekers know they're criminals who break into the country, now suing for millions of pounds for being put in a detention centre. I mean, for crying out loud. And that's coming from the ECHR. International, like you said, is dangerous. It has actually usurped democracy. It goes against national interest. The problem is that little bold bozo, people like him are part of the illegal immigration industrial complex. People like him and all his mates back at Doughty Chambers and those ones at Matrix Chambers make an arm and a leg out of this stuff. And I am fed up with these people. I'm fed up with lawyers actually putting themselves at the top of the tree regarding democracy as an inconvenience because they know best, because they make a lot of money from it. Follow the money. This is almost corruption at this point.
I agree. And let's analyse these migrants. There's 200 of them who broke into our country illegally, came across the channel in illegal small boats, broke into the country illegally, was sent to Manston Air Base for processing. They've got to be processed. They are now suing the government for millions of pounds because they say that they were detained there in inhumane conditions. What a joke. Now, if nothing else, I don't think they should even be allowed to make those legal claims. But if nothing else, why don't we say, oh, you want to sue the government, do you, for the inhumane conditions? That's fine. Who's your lawyer? How much is it going to cost you? Because we're not paying for it. Don't forget, we are not only in line to give these people millions of pounds, we are paying for the lawyers they are using to sue us.
Lawyers who are Lord Humour's best mates.
Yeah,
that's the problem.
It's insane.
It's a huge conflict of interest.
I think the migrant crisis, one thing we could do, this government obviously just tinkers around the edges. Shabana Mahmood already indicating she's just going to tinker around the edges. Here's one thing we could do that isn't that dramatic, that I think would make a major difference. Stop giving these people legal aid. Yeah. So when you come here and you sue us for asylum, you want to stay, you pay for your own lawyer.
But this is the thing. Imagine this situation, because this is what Germany is looking at to do, which is actually saying to people who want to challenge deportation, you do not get a right to a lawyer paid for by the German taxpayer. But could you imagine Sir Keir Starmer and Lord Hermer advocating for that when it is them and their barrister Chambers who do that job? How on earth are they going to sit there and say to their bezzers, oh, look, sorry, guys, the gig is up. You're not going to make any money anymore because we're going to put it into statute that you don't get to represent asylum seekers. This is the problem. Conflict of interest.
Of course it is. And this is becoming, thanks to Keir Starmer, this obsessive human rights lawyer, this is becoming a country that is ruled by lawyers. And Hermer and Starmer basically say that the most important thing in the world is the rule of law. No, it isn't. The most important thing in a democratic country is the rule of the democratically elected government, which must be superior to what lawyers want to do. And yet in Starmer's world, in Hermer's world, it is not. Lawyers rule the roost, and that's why this country is going down the pan, and that's why this government will never solve the migrant crisis.
And there you go, Kevin Alex back again. I love it when we team up. We just jig each other on, don't we? We get really excited.
We work ourselves into a fury.
We do. It's brilliant. Kev, you're amazing. Thank you ever so much for coming and mopping up all the scandal from PMQs. Now, we're going to stick with this topic. Going to take a short break now, but after the break, I'm going to be speaking with the wonderful Greg Swenson, chairman of Republicans Overseas, to ask him whether America will say to Britain, give that Mandelson marching orders. That's after this.
It was fantastic. I thought it felt like what Tory conference used to be like before it was taken over by just lobbyists. And I always think the most important thing with these places, if you go around and you talk to the people there and you get a read of who the average person there is. At the Labour Party, it's someone called Keir, someone in a suit, or a trade unionist. At the Conservative Party, well, it's not really people anymore. It's who remains of the MPs. And again, people in suits, lobbyists. With Reform, it was party members.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Wow, a lot of you messaging in about Lord Mandelson. Who can blame you? Because, I mean, it's spicy, isn't it? Sean in Yorkshire says, is Mandelson a member of the Fabian Society? Is that why he's been given the post? I loved your segment last week on the Society. It opened my eyes. Guess what, Sean? I think you already know the answer. Of course he is. Indeed, fully signed up Fabian. Who isn't? Who holds the levers of power? It's actually now the case of who isn't in that blimmin' thing. But no, he is. It is baffling baffling to me why they would appoint him. Joe from Norfolk says, I believe Starmer knew about Mandelson's connection to Epstein. He knew Trump didn't like him, so put Mandelson into America to bring Trump around, as I'm sure Mandelson probably knows some stuff about Trump and Epstein. Maybe. I mean, Lisa said something similar. They probably appointed Mandelson because he has something in common with Trump, which is Epstein. The Trump-Epstein thing is played a lot by the Democrats. But the point is this. They were friends back in like the 90s or something, but Donald Trump was the very first person to go, I don't want this guy anywhere near me, and washed his hands of him. I mean, that is just a fact. Right, so someone else has said they think that Trump will get rid of Mandelson later today. I wonder whether, because there's been a lot of heat on whether the Republicans are going to actually publish the Epstein files, this list of his supposed clients and all the rest of it. And the list now doesn't exist and there's a lot of pressure on them to do something. I wonder, actually, if they use Mandelson to throw a body under the bus, to throw some sort of, meat to the wolves on this one, that it might actually help their cause if they can use Mandelson as the sacrificial lamb. Why does that utter beep Starmer never ever answer a single question posed to him? Every week it's the same thing. He's a pathetic piece of slime and needs to go, says Matt in Staffordshire. Because actually I was going to say he's not a politician, but that actually makes him a politician in this day and age. I cannot remember the last time that politicians were told to just answer a question directly. The only thing Starmer knows, the only thing he knows is how to say due process, international law. But it is weird, isn't it? They all come from, all of these people, Governor of the Bank of England, Ambassador to America, the new Deputy Governor of the Bank of England, who's its economic advisor just ahead of this budget, which is now happening in November, used to be in the IMF and World Bank. Almost half of the cabinet, every single former Labour Prime Minister, Tony Blair, Gordon Brown, a lot of them, all of them from this one society called the Fabian Society, who brag openly on their website about, we've put all these people in positions, and it's like, no, nothing to see here. It's just a little lefty think tank, nothing more than that. Their emblem used to be a wolf in sheep's clothing. They wanted radical outcomes by surreptitious, gradual means. It sends a shiver down my spine. The names on that list will be high-ranking politicians, judges, royals. The real list will never be released, says someone else. Does the list even exist? Is this Comrade Keith Starmer's Chris Pincher moment, someone else asks. He's had many of them, hasn't he? He's had the Rayner moment. He's had basically half his cabinet now have had to be booted out for scandal. You couldn't make it up. It's almost like as day follows night, Mandelson's probably going to have to go. But how is that going to happen? We're going to take a short break and we're picking up on this thread with the brilliant Craig Swenson, chairman of Republicans Overseas, and see what he makes of this whole situation. So don't go anywhere.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back. Shall we start looking at the whole Mandelson scandal from the perspective of America? Now it's coming out very into the open about how close that relationship was, a relationship that was forged while that man was in prison for behaviour towards 14-year-old girls. A business deal struck between the two of them in the aftermath of that. Nothing to see here, says Sir Keir Starmer. Doesn't seem that way to me, does it? Let's speak now to Greg Swenson, chairman of the Republicans overseas. I mean, Greg, if you thought the Republicans had a bit of an issue with the Epstein stuff, woohoo, stand aside. Hold my beer. Look, here comes Peter Mandelson. What do you make of his appointment as American ambassador?
Yeah, I think, you know, when it first started, when he was first nominated, I was critical because of his past comments about President Trump, and he's backed away from those, which I thought was smart. And by the way, you know, so did J.D. Vance and Marco Rubio. So there's a long list of people who've made critical comments about the president and kissed and made up with the president. And I think that Peter Mandelson has done a great job as ambassador. You know, I don't think a lot of people know who he is in the U.S., but I think he's done, you know, being a Londoner, I can say that, you know, I'm really impressed with what he's done so far. So this thing is definitely a speed bump. Obviously, it's not good
what's he done to impress you? Because we call him the Prince of Darkness for a reason. We don't tend to like him in this country.
Yeah, because I think obviously there's some baggage from the Tony Blair days, but I, you know, from a conservative perspective, obviously, but I do think he's a great diplomat. He's doing a really great job. I saw him speak in Chicago. You know, I've not met him, but I saw him speak, and I thought his speech was really well done. The host, the moderator, what you could tell was just begging him to criticize President Trump and criticize the Republicans in the U.S., and he never did it. I mean, his speech could have been written by J.D. Vance, to tell you the truth.
The thing is, let me tell you something a bit about old Mandelson here. He's a very good slippery spin doctor. He's extremely capable of shedding skins and changing colours like a comedian for political expediency. But the problem is, this man doesn't just have a little bit of personal baggage. He's not just slightly damaged goods. He is radioactive waste. And I wonder how this is now going to, ahead of the state visit of Donald Trump, it's now being blown wide open. Prime Minister's question times, the biggest sort of, you know, moment in politics every week, the theatre in which it all comes out and people get things off their chest, the session where the headlines are written. And it's very clear the Conservative Party are going to go after this doggedly, and I don't blame them, because Mandelson's relationship with Epstein wasn't just, you know, on that aeroplane one day, wasn't everybody. He was called Petey. He was his best friend. He was doing business deals with Jeffrey Epstein after Jeffrey Epstein had been to prison. In fact, while the man was locked up in Clink for inappropriate relationships with children, and Mandelson was on the island, for crying out loud. This isn't just a fleeting acquaintance that happened because they happen to be in the same social networks. Surely this is going to create a headache for America and the special relationship.
It very well could. Obviously, the timing is not great. I think that's why many, especially the Democrats, you know, released, for example, the alleged birthday letter from President Trump. I really challenge the validity of that, but I also think the timing was pretty ridiculous. The Republican committee that's investigating the Epstein files is planning on releasing many of these documents that they've been reading. I thought it was pretty uncool of the Democrats to leak that yesterday or the day before. But I do think, look, I'm sure that Ambassador Mandelson will have some comments. I mean, I don't think he's going to get away with not addressing this, is just my guess. But again, I don't think it. I think that someone's out to get him, maybe. I don't know. I mean, that's speculation, but I don't know that it's necessarily just the Conservative Party. I think it might very well be the Democrats in the U.S. who don't like the fact that he's had a decent relationship with President Trump. I think he's done a great job so far But this is really bad timing, and I'm I guess we're all curious about what really happened and what kind of evidence there is. I wish the conservatives would focus on things like, and just like I argued, that labor should be focusing on that. Let's talk about affordability. Let's talk about the boats and illegal migration. Let's talk about net zero nonsense. What's something focusing on what he said or did 5 years ago or 15 years ago. I'm not sure that's really terribly important. But
even, I mean, look, from a British perspective, okay, this is one of probably our most senior diplomatic appointee, right? Our relationship with America is supposed to be the jewel in the crown. It is at the centre of the axis of Western cooperation, which for so long has brought peace and progress to the world and is an essential, vital relationship for geopolitical stability. And the person we've picked to do that job, it's not a man who's just, I don't know, once upon a time had an espresso in a New York coffee shop with Jeffrey Epstein.
Yeah.
He was on the island at the invite of Epstein while Epstein was in prison. He did a business deal with him after he was out of prison. And we knew that the Epstein files were a big problem in America when we made this appointment. To me, if I was an American right now, I'd be like, either you've not done due diligence, and I'm kind of worried about your intelligence services, given that we have this incredibly important relationship, i.e. Five Eyes, or they've said to Starmer, look, you do realise this guy was bezzers with Epstein, and it isn't just a little chit-chat here and there. There's a business deals, there's a staying on the island, there's you're my best friend. This isn't just a sort of, fleeting moment of they once met each other at a party. This is a solid bond. And you would have to wonder why Starmer went, this is the man for the job. If I was America, I'd be thinking, have the British lost their minds? Why, if they knew about this relationship, which of course they would have done, i.e. if they didn't, our intelligence services aren't doing their jobs properly, then why still appoint him? There's so many big questions to me that if I was America, I'd be worried.
Yeah, Alex, I think the list is long on many of his appointments. Look at the Home Secretary appointment. I thought that was, the recent one, complete disaster. You've got, a business secretary that's never been in business. So, this is classic, labor or left governments where there's no real world experience. It's just a bunch of lawyers or NGO types or think tank types that don't have any private sector experience. This is. So I think the list is pretty long on Keir Starmer's choices.
Well, I think you're right about that, but Greg, it's not often that we're not in absolute lockstep on anything. I kind of feel like I want to sort of shake you and go, Greg!
I know. I guess I'm guilty of actually liking the guy. So
how does this happen?
Yeah, it's.
They put something funny in your drink.
I never heard of him until he was appointed. Of course, because I didn't live here when he was working for Tony Blair. But I do think that he so far so good until the last couple of days.
Have you looked into his eyes? Did they sort of like rotate in a hypnotic spiral or something?
No. Never met him. So but I just think that this is again there's a long list of mistakes that Keir Starmer has made. This one might end up being one as well. And I'm also curious to, like you made a really good point. The intelligence services or someone must have known, and you wonder if Keir Starmer is going to argue that he didn't know or
well, this is interesting. Prime Minister's question time. Kemi Badenoch asked repeatedly, did you know? He didn't answer the question, and he said due process was, of course, followed ahead of this appointment. So that, I'm afraid, goes unanswered. Yeah. Yep. It's an interesting... Keep your eye on this one, Greg, because I think that this is going to develop ahead of the state visit. So there you go. I think there's still a lot more to come out. Greg, thank you ever so much. Chairman of Republicans Overseas. I'm like, Greg, man, how have you... He really likes Mandelson. I'm like, that surprised me. But honestly, I like it when people say he's a great speaker, and I went to see him speak, and he's actually been doing good things as an ambassador. It's always good to actually have, honesty when it comes to information on this programme. OK, we're going to take a short break now, but when we come back, we're going to be revisiting the borders crisis and talking about some of these ridiculous headlines we're seeing today. Hotels now calling themselves HMOs. The very first unescorted migrant boat for a long time has come over to Britain, i.e. it wasn't intercepted and actually brought here by Border Force. It made its own way. And, of course, the disgusting revelation that Channel migrants under the ECHR could be suing the UK government for the standards that they were kept in at Mandelson Detention Centre after breaking into our country. It makes me furious. That's coming up after this.
Well, Ed Miliband being branded an eco-hypocrite this morning in The Sun as well, because, of course, the Energy Secretary boasted in February that he'd installed a heat pump at his house. Now, I don't know who paid for that, but I can bet your bottom dollar that it was probably us. But it turns out that he's also got another property in Doncaster, South Yorkshire, and it's got a gas boiler in it. And he hasn't replaced the gas boiler. And worse than that, not only has he not replaced the gas boiler, but he's charged us for the bill.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back. Another day, another boat. Let's speak now to Alp Mehmet's chairman of Migration Watch UK. Well, watching migration, you must be the busiest man on the planet, Alp. Turns out the first unescorted migrant boat has reached British shores in nearly 3 years. I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing. I mean, it's a bad thing that most of the time when they're arriving on our shores, it's because they're basically being brought in by UK Border Force or the RNLI. But here we are. It just shows actually how that passage across the channel is just getting busier and busier.
Two things on that, Alex. First of all, this is the first one that we've heard about or reported in the press for the last 3 years. There's a lot of people who continually get in touch with me saying that it's happening all the time anyway. But that aside, let's not forget that there's also thousands who are coming in the backs of lorries and in containers, in all sorts of other ways, landing in small aircraft up and down the land. So this is really the tip of the iceberg as to those and the numbers that are coming in undetected. And there's no excuse for it, because we should be able to identify even a small frog jumping across the channel, let alone a boatload of migrants.
Couldn't agree more. It's the age-old sort of enigma, isn't it? This other story out. This actually chills me to the bones. The fact that Channel migrants are now in line for millions of pounds in compensation from us, the taxpayer, because that's who'll pay it, from the Home Office for being unlawfully detained in inhumane conditions. This is 200 of these people have broken into our country, who have cavorted with criminals in order to do so, have now lodged legal claims for unlawful detention and mistreatment at the Mandelson Migrant Holding Centre. Of course, they're citing the ECHR. The problem is, if this goes through, I have a feeling that the test case will go on and on and on to, we're going to have to blimmin' carry these people around on sedan chairs and feed them grapes because their treatment isn't going to be special enough.
Well, so some might think that we're already doing that, actually. But no, you're right. I mean, this is one area where we can actually change our laws and do it quickly and say that anyone who's arriving here illegally, and it is illegally, well, the suggestion that it's okay because they claim asylum at the first opportunity, that's just a nonsense. What we're doing is really all the time thinking about the conditions, the welcome we're going to lay on, the comfort that a lot of these people are going to be kept in. All that does is persuade and attract more and more people to come. And until we detain, deal with them quickly, process and remove them, and put in place the sort of rules and legislations that are necessary to do that, frankly, they're going to continue coming in droves. We are heading towards 50,000 this year alone.
That we know of. 50,000 on the boats that we know of. As you were saying before, lorries, small aircraft flying in legally, then losing your documents. I mean, it goes on and on. And then here we go. These protests against asylum hotels seem to be cracking through. Then the government were forced to defend the one in Epping Forest. And now it turns out that some of these hotels are appealing legally to sort of rename themselves as houses of multiple occupation. In terms of being able to then evade the planning permissions of whether or not you can house asylum seekers. Don't worry, we're HMOs now.
Well, this is the government being sneaky again, changing the title of what is really accommodation for as long as it takes to process asylum seekers. It is another nonsense. What we should be doing is actually converting all those camps, all those forces camps that we've had and are still available, converting them and keeping people there, not allowing them with £50 in their pockets a week to wander around at will, but keeping them there, detaining them until decisions are made. Right. And those decisions should be made quickly.
But of course then, if we detain them, they'll just sue us for detaining them. I mean, it's just that there is no route out of this, is there? It just goes on and on. Alp, thank you ever so much. It's always great to catch up with you. Hello, Mr. Collins.
Well, hello.
Did you watch PMQs?
It was on. We were listening to bits of it while we were putting this amazing booster rocket laden show on. But which bit you were referring to, the Mandelson stuff? Yeah. I
mean, it's astonishing. It's astonishing. I was just messaging America's not really across this. America's not really woken up to this. They've got their own problems with the Epstein list and the files and this, that and the other. And I feel like no one's actually pointed out to anyone stateside, oh, you know, the British ambassador, he used to be old Jeff's best mate.
Do you know what? And also his best mate, even when he knew about the stuff that was going on. And that's the bit. If you didn't know, you can't help knowing somebody in a previous life.
If you're staying at their gaff while they're in prison,
while
and
they're
doing
in
a
jail, they've got all sorts of dubious artwork around the house.
And you're doing a business deal with them when they've come out of clink for inappropriate relations with 14-year-olds.
The trouble is with Mandelson, he was so seduced by rich people and the trapping, sitting on yachts and being invited to minor members of the Saudi royal family's birthdays. He loved all of that.
But the bigger question for me is choosing him as the appointee, because you know, it was in. I think Kemi's line of questioning in PMQs was bang on. What did you know?
Yep.
And why did you appoint him? And Starmer couldn't answer what he knew, but he did say due process has been followed, which then asks the question, well are MI5 and MI6 useless? Or did they know and say to Starmer, the guy was Epstein's best mate and this is a big story going on in America right now, and Starmer went, I'm going to do it anyway?
Or did somebody just not flag it? You know, the fact is, Alex, this is the more you think